We're live. Matt Drew,
Hello.
thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So you're a state rep in what district?
I am Manchester Ward 10, Hillsborough 19. So west side, just south of the Piscataquag River, down to Bedford and out to Goffstown.
And how long have you been doing that for?
Less than a year.
Less than a year.
Yeah,
So you're new, just like Steve.
Yep, this is my first term. We got elected together. In
Okay.
fact, I helped with his recount.
Okay, that's right, because he won by like 3 votes, right?
Yeah, it was very close.
Mm-hmm. So how you liking it?
It has been an experience.
Yeah.
The state uses an amazing amount of paper. That was my first impression.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I coming out of the tech world, I do everything on computer. I do I have my laptop, I have my phone. I do, that's just how I work. And everything we do at the State House, with very few exceptions, is all printed out, hard copy paper. Like when they pass things out in the legislative chamber, it's all paper. We do have, and this was installed apparently, I'm not sure, 10 or 15 years ago, but we have the electronic voters, so we can actually press a button to vote. But that's the only bit of technology they have in the chamber, pretty much.
Now, when you vote on the bills, do they just hand you a docket of the bills and it's on you to kind of go and research them yourself, or do they hand you a copy of that bill as well?
They give you the calendar, which has all of the bills that are up for consideration with a description. We also receive what we call the white sheet, which is House Republican leadership, which is the bills that we're going to cover, and House Republican leadership's position, i.e. the caucus's position, if any. We also get the gold sheet, which is from the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. So I think that's the right, NHLA. They do evaluations of bills with a specific liberty bent. And so we get that with their opinions. We get the pink sheet, which is the House Republican Alliance, which has the list of bills with their opinion, and then sometimes other people will pitch in. So usually when we walk into the chamber, we have a stack of papers with people's different positions to follow.
Are you a part of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance?
I am, yes.
Okay. Are you also a Free Stater?
I am, yes.
Okay.
I moved up in 2014, so
Okay.
I've been here 11 years almost.
So you're pretty much, you would go by, you would call yourself a Libertarian Republican.
Absolutely.
Okay. And what drove you to want to become a state representative?
Obligation. No, so being a Free Stater, I moved up here looking to help out with things. I was initially active, and then I kind of dropped off as I was working in Boston. I was commuting back and forth. If you've ever done that commute, you know how awful it is.
Oh, it's terrible.
And so I did that for a couple of years, and then I ended up working nights at a company out in Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of dropped out of being active, but I still, I kept my hand in, still paid attention. And this is when I left that company, I realized, I essentially retired when I left that company. I'm like, I looked at my financial situation, was like, I think I'm okay for a while. And so I thought, this is my chance to give back, to do something for all the people who helped me and, advertise things and got people going and help organize things. Because there's a lot of different people who do a lot of different things to help lots of stuff. Like, people think Free Staters are this, single block. We're not. It's like the most disorganized, amorphous group you could possibly imagine. There's Free Staters that I don't like. There's Free Staters who are great. It's a big group. And so, in any case, this was my chance. And, I thought, well, I'll go ahead and run. Mark Warden encouraged me to run, who's a longtime rep. He ran again this time and won his seat as well.
And what state did you come from?
I had lived in North Carolina for about 20 years before I came up here. Before that, I was all over the place. My dad was in the Army, so, we did Louisiana, multiple Fort Bragg, North Carolina areas. So I've lived in 3 different areas in North Carolina. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then we lived in Italy for 3 years when I was a kid. Spent some time in Germany, all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
different schools and everything. So, yeah, so North Carolina, I've lived in 3 places. When I was very young, before my dad rejoined the Army, he was a Vietnam vet, but he spent a lot of time in Montreat, North Carolina, which is just outside of Asheville. It's the area that got wiped out by the floods.
Last year?
Last year, yeah. And so I lived there when I was very young for many years. It's actually one of the reasons I like New Hampshire so much is because the terrain and the way it feels, the whole is very, very similar to that. And I like that area very much. I've got some friends who still live there. And then I lived in the Fort Bragg area, Fayetteville area, because my dad was stationed there. And then I lived all over the Triangle area. So I've lived in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Cary, all of those. Basically every town, Durham, that's in that area, I lived there at some point or another. So.
And when did you first find out about the Free State Project?
It was probably 2010, 2012, something like that. I ran for city council in Durham, which was an experience. I lost, obviously, because I ran as a libertarian. But that kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things about how stuff works. And when I heard about the Free State Project, I was like, oh, yeah, that actually makes sense, because it's about concentrating people so that we can have an outsized effect, because activists, people who are active, make up a higher percentage than you would think, and they can actually have an impact and have an influence. And that I think the Free State Project is probably if there's going to be any sort of libertarian, even leaning area in the United States, that's pretty much the only way we're going to accomplish anything. Because, I tried in North Carolina for many years, and it's, you just don't get anywhere.
What is the biggest barrier in North Carolina compared to New Hampshire?
Not enough people, not enough votes, not enough activists, not enough money.
What's the demographic there right now as far as political party goes? Are they...
So you're going to get me talking about North Carolina. So before 2010, North Carolina had been completely controlled by the Democratic Party for almost 100 years.
Really?
Yeah. And so whenever you hear them talking about gerrymandering in North Carolina, don't listen to them, because some of the districts that came out of the Democratic control of North Carolina were absolutely absurd. There was one district that ran down the highway for almost 60 or 80 miles between the Raleigh-Durham area and Charlotte, and it shot out outshoots going here and there, and it was specifically created to elect one specific person.
Mm-hmm.
And when he left, it fell apart.
Really?
Yeah.
And
so it was a disaster.
Now, do you think...
So now, yeah, so 2010, there was the red wave. The Republicans took control of the legislature. And so there's been some back and forth. So their political situation is actually pretty similar to ours. They have less Republican control. They still have, I believe they still have a Democratic governor. I've kind of lost track of things because I've been focused on New Hampshire now. But so they're going back and forth with their governor, and they've made a couple of strides towards that thing. But again, if you're a libertarian and you're looking to reduce the size of government, the Republicans, the standard Republicans, the conservative Republicans, often aren't much of a help, and so that's what they have there.
Yeah.
So their government is getting bigger. And it will continue to get bigger. That's just the way it is.
The old guard Republicans type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Old guard Republicans, business Republicans.
Yep.
We actually ran into that this session because we tried to defund the Council for the Arts. We tried to defund the tourism advertising, and it was put back by Republicans voting saying no. So it was like, well, okay. Like, these should have been relatively straightforward things. Like, these are, especially when it came out that the tourism office was putting out Pride ads, which, it's not a problem necessarily. It's just they claim that they get this 16-to-1 return on their spending, and you're like, well, you're advertising to a relatively small demographic of people who don't really live here and who don't come here very much. So it's like, how are you getting such a huge return on an advertisement like this?
Yeah, I think it was Osborne. I think I saw on the floor talking about how the arcade over in Laconia, they don't need New Hampshire to be paying to advertise for them because they do a great job on their own.
Yeah. Well, and any private company, if you could find advertising that gave you a 16-to-1 return, everybody would jump on that.
Right.
Like, there would be whole groups of companies jumping on that. It doesn't happen. And I've seen these ads. North Carolina does the same thing. Virginia does the same thing. Virginia advertises in North Carolina. North Carolina advertises in Virginia. We see the Massachusetts advertisements in New Hampshire. It's like, people are advertising back and forth, and I don't believe it really accomplishes anything. So, but even something simple and small like that, cutting it was impossible.
It wasn't a whole lot of money either, was it?
No, it was. I want to say it was $14 million, something like that. So, I mean, it was something, but against the larger budget, it's not very much. And the Council for Arts was even less.
And the budget just passed last week.
Yes.
And what did you vote on it?
So I voted yes on HB 282 and HB 2 and HB 1.
And HB 282 was what?
So HB 282 was the trailer bill.
Trailer bill. Okay. So
in order to understand this, you have to understand the dynamics of the New Hampshire House. So most people think, the Republicans have a 220 person, so they got like a 40-person majority. Republicans have 220, and the Democrats have 180. So Republicans have this huge advantage. But what you have to understand is the Republican Party is not a single monolithic bloc. The Democrats aren't either, but they're much better at this. So they have people who break away from them, but for the most part, they vote as a bloc. And, of course, it's also easier to vote as a bloc when you're in the minority.
I've heard that a lot.
So the Republicans have essentially kind of three wings. We have the extremist libertarians, which is a pretty substantial wing in New Hampshire, partly because of the Free State Project and partly because it's New Hampshire. And then we have the what I would call the standard conservatives, who tend to lean more towards supporting the military, Christian values, that sort of thing. And then we have a subset of Republicans who are it kind of shades between the folks who support police and fire, but they tend to support public unions. They tend to support public schools, government schools, and so that group was the ones who were behind the Group 2 changes. Who want this money to go to the policemen and firemen.
We're talking about the pensions?
Yeah, the pension deal. Okay. So that group is, and it's amorphous. Like, I'm not going to name any names because that group changes on different issues, and you'll see the divisions disappear when we have certain votes. Like voting on the transgender stuff was, all the Republicans are on board with that.
Yeah.
So and I'm not even going to say that these guys are wrong, but that group was the one that were supporting the governor in her quest to pay all this money to these policemen and firemen.
Was this new additional pensions, or have we been paying pensions to these police and firemen before this?
So I am not 100% in coverage of all of the history and everything that happened here, but it's my understanding that this particular group has not retired yet. So when this has come up in the past, money has been allocated to cover the pensions of people who are retiring. And the reason this came up this year is because a lot of these people are getting on in years. They've put in their 20 or their 25 years, and they're getting ready to retire. So they're looking to, make sure that their pensions are covered, which is perfectly understandable, right? Mm-hmm. So we have allocated additional money in the past to this. Apparently in 2011, the reason that they tried to reform this is because the pension system was unsustainable. It was so much money, and the people who were in it were using the rules to spike their pensions to levels that were just unaffordable. Like the state couldn't afford it. And so in 2011, some of this stuff was reformed and trimmed back. And what's been happening since then is it's been kind of creeping back up again. And this budget was no different. So we're creeping the budget again to cover this particular group. And so that faction that supported that, there's enough of them that if they vote with the Democrats, they can get that stuff passed. Democrats will vote for pretty much any spending, especially when it comes to public employees and public unions. And so HB 282 was specifically utilized in order to attract that vote. And you can see that in the vote. And the reason I voted for it was I didn't want it to get any worse. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make sure that that's what was passed because we'd already been outmaneuvered. So they voted for that. The Democrats voted for that. That was the pension increase. And then HB 2 was the rest of the stuff in the budget.
Okay. Yeah, because it was a pretty heated argument.
It was, and that's actually a substantial amount of money. I
Just
heard
from just from what I've seen online, I didn't even watch any of the hearing last Thursday, but I was watching people firing off on Twitter over it, and
yeah, there was a lot of back and forth. It was pretty much all we talked about for like 3 weeks.
yep.
Just trying to figure out, first of all, trying to figure out what was going on, because there was a lot of negotiation happening, and of course, there's not everybody's involved in that. So if we're going to vote, we need to know what's happening. We didn't actually know what we were voting on until the night before.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, so where was I? Oh, so HB2, and then so I voted for that because NHLA, in negotiations with the Senate and the governor, had a specific list of things that we had asked for, and that was mostly met. And so we had agreed to vote for the budget. So I followed through with that and voted yes.
Now, do we run a deficit with that budget?
Well, technically we can't run a deficit because the budget has to be balanced.
Okay.
But yes, that I'm not happy with that budget at all because there's too much spending involved.
Is there enough tax revenue to pay for it?
That's what they say.
Because there was a big shortfall when it came to alcohol sales and tobacco sales.
Yes, there was discussions of shortfalls, and then the budget committee. What we did was we increased a number of fees, which hadn't been increased in a long time. So okay, but still, fees affect people directly. So not particularly happy about that. Better than taxes, but not by much. And they pulled in a bunch of gambling revenue, so video gambling. And so part of the budget, you'll notice, was loosening of those rules. And that's why, because they needed that additional gambling revenue in order to make the budget balance out. So we'll see if that actually happens or not.
So are they basing this off of actual funds that have been collected this previous year, or are they basing this budget off of projections for the following?
Everybody's basing it off projections.
Okay.
So, and there were different sets of projections. The House was the most, what's the right word? Conservative, pessimistic is the word. Yeah, the House was the most pessimistic. The Senate was higher. The governor was the highest, I believe, in most areas.
So we could fall short.
We absolutely could. Yeah.
Huh. Now, we did get repeal of inspection stickers.
We did.
But does that also mean lowering of fees?
Well,
in that respect,
only in that particular case, because there's no more inspection required than the fee for the inspection is removed. So yeah, but that's the only one. The fees kind of went up and down, and there was some negotiation, and I'm not actually sure of the details of exactly where everything landed, because people like, these businesses who have 10 or 20 trucks, this is going to be a couple $1,000s for all of the stuff that they need to register. So,
but aren't you federally? Is that a federal rule as well? As far as trucks go, if you're using it for commercial?
Not to my knowledge.
That's one thing I was wondering about this, is that if you have a company where you have commercial vehicles, that's regulated by the federal government, like federal DOT and all that. So I was wondering if that was something that you still had to do in order to have your trucks on the road.
I would say yes. If you're familiar with that. The only thing that we were affecting were like state registration. So when you go to pay your taxes for your vehicles, or you go to register your vehicle, and like things like vanity plates went up to $60, stuff like that.
Okay. How much were they before?
I don't know.
Oh.
I've never
had one. But we're the second state in the country with the second most vanity plates in the country.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
We're behind California, which is a huge population difference, I would say. And then so you said that it was obligation that made you want to run for office. How hard was it how tough of a campaign was it for you?
It's a good question. Like it wasn't a hard fought campaign. There weren't a bunch of personal attacks. It wasn't, me going back and forth with my opponents. It was just mainly a grind. And actually Brian Cole and the local Manchester Republicans helped with that a lot. What we did was we got all of the candidates together and anybody else who wanted to help, and we'd go out on Saturday morning and do door knocking and handing out stuff, which really helped us get to know everybody else, and helped us to help, because you could cover, with 20 people, you can cover a lot of ground, especially in, the wards that are sized in New Hampshire. And so that was very, very helpful, I think. And I had some support from some other groups, relatively minor, but useful. They sent out some mailers, that sort of thing. I honestly didn't expect to win because my ward has leaned Democratic pretty hard over the last 20 years or so. Most of the reps that have been elected from Ward 10 have been Democrats, and people have tried. Dan and Tammy Garthwaite?
No.
They tried multiple times to get elected in Ward 10 and didn't make it. And I think they got elected once or maybe twice, but they weren't able to consistently get reelected. And it's possible that I won't either. But I ended up in first place by about 120 votes, which was a shocker to me.
Well, I've heard that we have something like 40,000 new Republicans in the state since the previous election, I think.
Yeah. There was a lot of sentiment at the time that was very angry. I think not just like New Hampshire's not a big Trump supporting state. It was more, I think people were just really unhappy with the Biden administration.
It was a rough 4 years.
And yeah, it was.
Yeah. So I would think that people were moving up here from Massachusetts, New York, California. Normally you would be worried that those people coming up from that area are going to vote blue, but it seems like they might have been just Republicans fleeing from those states.
I think there was a lot of that, yeah.
Are there any Democrat free staters?
There used to be. There aren't anymore.
No?
Yeah. A couple of free staters have run as Democrats. But Amanda Bolden was one of the ones, and she's basically converted to a Democrat at this point. So she actually put out a blog post or a notice last week or the week before where she's like, no, I'm not a free stater anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you've been involved with them since 2012, and you moved in 2014, and then you said you fell out of it. What caused you to fall out of it?
Mostly just busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of the activism at the time, and I'll tell other libertarians this, I don't like drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I have very specific policy positions on drugs. I don't think having the government dictate what drugs people can take is a good idea. In fact, I think it's very bad and it's very counterproductive in terms of the actual harm to a society. But me, myself, I don't take them. Mm-hmm. I don't like them. I don't like to be around people who are taking them. And at the time, there's a lot of libertarians who are a lot into weed. And so, you'd go to meetings and people would be smoking weed and you're having to smell it. And you're just like, yeah, sorry, guys. Mm-hmm. I'm out.
Yeah.
So there's that. But it was mostly just being busy with work and not having the time to do anything.
Okay. What do you think is the biggest issue that you want to tackle as in the State House as a state representative, personally?
Personally,
yeah.
I think personally the issues surrounding vaccines are going to be one of the issues that I'm going to work very hard on in the next session. I'm a member of the Vaccine Injury Caucus. The reason I left my last job was because the company was talking to us about implementing the vaccine mandates. And I was like, do I really want to work for a company that's willing to do that to their employees?
So this is around 2021?
No. Yeah.
Okay. And so what is the vaccine injury? What is it again?
The Republican Vaccine Injury Caucus.
Okay.
We're a group of people who have either been directly affected by vaccines or or support those who have been. And one of I would say the big successes that we had in the budget was HB 357, which removed rulemaking authority from DHHS to put vaccines onto the mandate list for kids who are going to school.
How many are on that mandate list right now?
Right now I want to say there's 7. Might be. I'd have to go back and look. There were 3 that were in rulemaking, and there were, I want to say, either 4 or 6 that are actually in statute. And the 3 that were in rulemaking got moved into statute as part of the deal, which some of the activists were not particularly happy about.
And is that for just the state of New Hampshire?
That is just for the state of New Hampshire. Yeah.
But we also have religious exemption in New Hampshire as well?
We do. But one of the issues is that very few people actually know about that. Mm-hmm. And when they go to recommend or when they go to enforce this, they don't tell people that religious exemptions are available. You have to know.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the bills someone else is looking at for next session is going to be to require them to inform people when they tell them you need to get these shots in order for your kid to go to government school, but you can get a religious exemption. There was also another bill this past session that we passed. We had passed a bill either the year before or the year before that talked about these exemptions, and in the language of the bill they mentioned the word form. And so DHHS and the schools actually created a form that had a number of invasive questions and like, oh, you need to fill this out in order to get a religious exemption. And so this year we're like, no, all you need is notification. And the Senate changed it to written notification, but that's it now. So all you need is written notification to the school that you have a religious exemption, and they can't require it of your kid.
I remember watching that debate on the floor a couple months ago. And it was kind of confusing for me to realize what was actually going on. Like if it's just a form, but I didn't realize that the federal government was using that to.
It wasn't the feds. It was the local government schools.
Oh, local government schools. Yeah. So people don't know that basically all you need is that piece of paper. You don't have to get any written permission from your pastor or anything like that if you get a religious exemption in New
You don't
Hampshire.
even need to be part of an organized religion. You can simply request a religious exemption, and they're required to give it to you.
And then if you go right over the border into Maine, you don't have any more religious exemption at all. They eliminated that through ballot initiative in 2018.
Really? Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, because I mean, is the COVID vaccine on the school?
It is not.
But they wanted to.
They wanted to, and if I get my way, it will never be. And I think enough information has come out at this point that most people are like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that they definitely scared people with COVID, and I think that there were.
Well, yeah. What COVID did was reveal that there is an enormous amount of corruption in that process.
And a lot of processes, and even in the school. Like that's why we're seeing such an uptick in homeschool right now, I think, because they just overplayed their hand with COVID. It actually, in the long run, it'll probably do more good than harm.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the beneficial side effects of COVID was that parents got to see what was actually being taught in public schools, and they freaked out.
Yeah,
essentially, they're like, "What in the world? Like, you guys aren't." I mean, you can look at our schools and I actually had this discussion with a Manchester school board member who called me about the budget. We were talking about that because Manchester was going to lose some funding, and the Manchester schools as a whole, their achievements, their proficiencies are just really incredibly poor, less than 50% across the board, and there's no evidence that that's changing. It hasn't changed for many years now. In fact, it's been going down, even though their funding has been going up. And it's like, so what is being taught? What is going wrong? Like, and so it's pretty clear that parents found out when their kids started taking these classes via Zoom, and the parents saw that and were like, what? So that was actually pretty beneficial. And the COVID vaccine is just a simple symptom of a larger problem. And that's the fact that because people believe in vaccines, they believe they're effective, they believe that they help reduce disease, the willingness to suppress any negative information about them is very high. And so what's been happening is that any negative information associated with vaccines has been squashed. And Robert Kennedy Jr. At the federal level just discovered an internal CDC report that showed that the hepatitis B vaccine had something like a 1,135% increase in autism among the kids who took it.
I just heard that today.
Yeah, and it's like, well, why was that an internal study that never came to the light of day? Well, it's because they want to protect that power to enforce vaccines, and they've gone to extremes for that are way beyond what most people would understand in terms of, and what most people are willing to tolerate in terms of risk and reward versus vaccines. So it's really skewed right now.
And they give that to babies as soon as they're born. Like
they do,
within hours.
Which is something, it's one of the ones that makes absolutely no sense to me, because hepatitis B, of course, is a sexually transmitted disease. So you're giving a baby a vaccine for a sexually transmitted disease. Why are you doing that? And the only justification I've heard is, well, they might be sexually abused.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not a that's not a reason to give them the vaccine.
Well, I can tell you what a pediatrician told me when I was in the hospital when my baby was being born. They said, don't take her to a grocery store because she could catch it from a grocery cart.
What?
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah,
not.
if she put her mouth on the handles of the grocery cart, she could get hepatitis B. And I know how it's transmitted. We did some research before we had had kids, and I knew that I was being lied to right then. And it's such a blatant lie. I was pretty taken back by it, where I didn't argue with her. I just let her do her thing, and no thank you. And because I couldn't believe they would say something that ridiculous.
Yeah. And at this point, partially because of COVID and partially because of other stuff that's come out, they've basically lost all credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only way to, in my mind at least, to restore that is to make things voluntary. So we're going to be working very hard in the next session to get rid of vaccine mandates from the statutes entirely.
Well, if you go to a pediatrician's office and you look at the walls, there's really nothing on the walls about nutrition. It's mostly about vaccines. It's and I've heard people say that that's the whole point of the monthly checkups, is to give children the vaccines at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, and I think a year. And by the time they're 6 months old, I think it's something like 24 weeks? Yeah, 24 weeks. They'd have 27 shots, individual shots.
Yeah.
More than one a week. So, and there's been a rise in, I mean, you could probably tell me more about this than I even know, because
I'll be honest, I'm not an expert, but I came into this because I got assigned to the HHS committee, and we worked on a bunch of that stuff this year. My opposition originally was all to COVID. And the interesting thing is, I don't actually think that most of the current vaccines, they have problems. I'm not saying they don't, but I think they're also effective in their particular role. And the problem is not that the vaccines don't do what they're supposed to do, although that may be the case in some instances, and it's certainly the case with the COVID vaccine, because it doesn't do at all what it's supposed to do. But it's the fact that the side effects have been concealed and hidden, because
Absolutely.
we can't allow anybody to speak bad about these, because they're the sacred cow of public health, and that is a situation that really needs to be remedied.
They're not allowing people to know the risk, the actual risk versus the actual reward.
Exactly.
And when a lot of these vaccines, a lot of the ones that we have now, they've been added on since the 80s, since they've had immunity. But the ones that they started off of with like polio, measles, mumps, rubella, if you do some research on those diseases, how much of that was caused by living conditions and environmental conditions?
A substantial amount, yes.
So,
but not all of it.
Not all of it. And some people do have weakened immune systems. But people that are going through cancer treatments who do have weakened immune systems, they can't even get those vaccines to begin with. Those are the people that should be isolated from a population where they could get something like that. I'm not an expert on it either, so all I know is that when the doctor's lying to you when your baby's being born, it makes you not want to get any of them. It makes you question everything you're being told. And
rightfully so.
Yeah.
There's no... And that attitude of we know better, this is what you're supposed to do has been the case for many years now.
It doesn't help their cause.
No, it doesn't. In fact, at this point, as you noted, it's counterproductive.
Absolutely.
Because when people come to me and they say that, I'm like, I'm sorry, you're wrong. And by saying that, by pushing that, by insisting on that, you're making your position worse. If you actually want people to get vaccinated and you want to prevent these diseases from spreading, you're going to need to convince them that these vaccinations are worth the risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some cases, with Hep B being the obvious one, especially now, it's not. And people are starting to realize that.
I also heard RFK Jr. say that there were more incidences reported with the COVID vaccine, which was probably going to get flagged, but more instances reported with the COVID vaccine on the VAERS reporting system than all other vaccines combined since it's been created 20 years ago.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, but they don't talk about it, and they still push it.
Yeah,
and there's other countries that are pulling it off the shelves.
because at this point they're stuck. If they admit they were wrong, then everything collapses, right?
Yeah.
Then they have to admit they were wrong about all of this stuff, and in the bureaucratic mind, that is like the end of the world, and so they're never going to do that.
So do you have a lot of people come in and testify on that committee?
Yes, although I think as far as the vaccine-specific stuff goes, there was a COVID response committee that I was not a part of, but members of the Vaccine Injury Caucus were, and that happened the year before I was elected, last 2023, and so that was where everybody testified about the various things that happened. The most of the testimony that went on in this session was about the rulemaking and the different mandated vaccines. So we were talking specifically about the mandates that are in statute.
And so I read online that you co-sponsored 2 different bills in this past session.
Sure.
Do you know?
I'll be honest. It all becomes a blur after a while. You're like, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Co-sponsoring doesn't mean a whole lot at the moment because I did sign on to a couple bills, but I don't even remember what they were at this point. So it's mostly the prime sponsor who ends up shouldering the responsibility of shepherding the bill through the process.
So how has it been since you've started in January compared to what you thought it would be and what it actually is?
Okay, so aside from the whole paper thing, which is disturbing, it's been about what I expected. The being attacked by your own side is exceptionally unpleasant. I knew intellectually that would happen, but experiencing it is a different thing.
And what were you attacked about?
The HB 357 compromise that went into the budget was one of them. Some of the activists were very unhappy, and other reps were very unhappy with that because, they wanted those vaccines to be sunsetted and dropped from the statute entirely, dropped from rulemaking. And that didn't happen because there was a compromise made with the Senate to get the rulemaking power removed. And so they were very unhappy with that. And they were actually encouraging people to vote no on the budget because of that specific issue. So, yeah, they were not happy with me for voting yes.
So that was the more libertarian side that was attacking you for that.
Not more libertarian. It's more anti-vaccine.
Anti-vaccine. Okay. And what are the other things that have kind of shaped your view on the State House and how it operates since getting in there?
I think understanding the dynamics, the explanation that I had with the different groups and understanding why the budget voted, why the votes for the budget happened the way they did. I did not understand that coming in. And it took me a while to figure out what was going on. The first indication of that was the loss of right to work, where right to work is an issue of personal responsibility and, being able to say, having both sides be able to say, I don't want to work with the union. And from the union side saying, I shouldn't be forced to support these people who aren't part of the union. And so but that got defeated by essentially the same group of people who voted with the governor on the budget. Not all the same people, but the group itself is fairly similar.
Yeah, because I've always thought that right to work was like a Republican, pro-Republican stance.
I thought it was too, but some Republicans don't believe it.
Really? Now, there was a change on it because I talked to Steve Kesselring about this, and if I can remember right, the whole right to work argument it goes back to like 2018. There was a court ruling in 2018, I think he said, and so my understanding was that it was all unions, but is this just about public sector unions that was about?
The court ruling was, and that was the fact that court ruling was, and I can't remember the name of it, but it talked about public sector unions cannot force public employees to join.
Okay.
That was essentially the ruling. So in New Hampshire, if you're a public employee, you're not required to be part of the union. Now, did that have much of an effect? Not really, because most public employees are a member of the union. But be that as it may, right to work is for everybody. So right to work basically says you can't force people to join the union or pay dues if they're working for the company. And the union cannot be forced to represent people who are not part of the union. That's people miss that there's two sides to this, because there's the current setup with employment and unions in the United States is incredibly skewed. It's really messed up. It's because if a single union votes, like I think it's a majority vote, if they vote to unionize your workplace, there's nothing you can do about it. You're forced to deal with them, and you're forced to deal with them with regards to all of your employees, even the people who aren't part of the union or don't want to be part of the union. And the flip side is that the unions are forced to represent people who aren't part of the union, even if they don't want to. And so I think that entire setup is wrong. The way it should work is that if the company wants to deal with the union, they can. The union should represent the people who are members of the union, and that should be the end of it. But unfortunately, that's not the way the federal law is set up. And right to work is essentially the only step that states can take to change that.
Mm-hmm. So with the Republican Party in New Hampshire, because it seems like there's a lot of friction and fraction. What do you think are the biggest hurdles to try and get them all on the same page as much as possible? I mean, obviously it's not going to happen. And start really working together so there's not so much fighting going on.
Well, we can get them to work together on most, I think, social issues. Mm-hmm. So issues that had to deal, like I talked about the transgender stuff briefly earlier.
Yeah, that all passed without any...
That all passed with no problem. And a lot of that stuff went through, and a lot of other stuff went through without any problems.
Parental rights.
Yeah, parental rights went through. EFAs went through.
That's right.
Universal EFAs. So
there were a lot of good things that came out of the budget.
There were.
But there were people that are unhappy with the size of the budget.
Yes. I mean...
And then there were people that are also unhappy with the size of the budget because it wasn't big enough. I mean, obviously, those were mostly Democrats, but...
I voted for it, and I wasn't happy with the size of the budget. So, yeah, because our initial ask was we wanted a 10% cut. Mm-hmm. Like the amount of money that the state spends on various things, particularly with regards to illegal immigration and importing people and that sort of thing, is a lot of money.
Is that still in the budget? That wasn't it passed with just a promise to address that in the fall?
I don't know about that. I know that none of that spending was actually affected.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, and you'd think that Republicans would be able to agree on that, but apparently not.
I think that's probably one of the biggest issues that people are worried about.
It is,
and they didn't address it. They kicked the can down the road.
That and housing are probably the two top issues.
Yep.
And we tried to address housing, and most of that got shut down.
What is your stance on the housing situation and the bills that have been introduced?
So I think most of them were okay. There is a lot of information out there that people are, and I understand where they're coming from, but I very much dislike the way that they present things. What they're presenting is that the state is taking over zoning, which is not true. The bills that were presented were bills that restricted the power of local zoning and planning boards to do specific things. For example, mandating that all lots be a certain minimum size. Mm-hmm. I think there was one town that was mentioned out in western New Hampshire that has a 50-acre minimum lot size in their zoning. So none of their lots are smaller than 50 acres. Mm. Well, okay, that's a little excessive, I think, but so there was one of the bills was to say the minimum lot size cannot be mandated to be more than 2 acres
for rural. That's for land that's not on sewage or town municipality sewage or water. And then if you're on municipality sewage or water, you can have as little as a half an acre.
Right.
Yeah. So there's steps to it.
Yeah. And note that is not saying you can't have lots that are bigger than that,
Right.
because most lots are bigger than that. And that's not going to change at any time. It's not going to change quickly, for sure. What it's just saying is that the town can't mandate a minimum lot size. So the town can't tell you, if you have a 3-acre lot and you want to split it into, a couple of 1.5s, the state can't tell you, or the town can't tell you, no, you can't do that.
As long as you're in the state guidelines.
Yeah, as long as you're within state guidelines and you're on water and sewer.
Yeah.
And within the water and sewer limits, so you still couldn't split it if they can't support it. So there's plenty of countervailing factors to make sure that doesn't get excessive. And I think as far as I'm concerned, I think one of the problems that we have is that the power of the zoning and planning boards is too great. We've swung the pendulum too far in the favor of the planning and zoning boards can essentially tell you everything that you can do with your property. And as a libertarian, I have kind of a problem with that. Now, property rights are more than just owning the land. You can have property rights in an apartment. You can buy an apartment that's part of a building. So when you have property rights in our current environment, and I think in any environment, people need to understand that what you're buying is not just the physical property. You are also buying rights to water. You are also buying rights to air. You are also buying rights to specific other things. You're buying rights to not have someone destroy your property by, for example, strip mining the property next door, which causes your land to erode into theirs, right? So there's a whole set of property rights that people buy. And what's happened is that most of those property rights have been handed over to the zoning and planning boards. And so people don't actually have the ability to build on their own property in the way that they would like. And so I'm not advocating, even though I'm a libertarian, I'm not advocating for people can build whatever they want. I can build a 20-story, 400 dwelling unit building on my 2-acre lot, and there's nothing you can do about it. And, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the zoning and planning boards have way too much power. Mm-hmm. And they are, in many places, they are specifically controlling the ability for people to do anything with their property, let alone, build an accessory dwelling unit so that their elderly in-laws can live with them, and so they can keep them out of state facilities, which saves the state a lot of money. So I think what I'd like to see is exactly what those bills were trying to do, which is putting some limits on the zoning and planning boards about what they can and can't do. Unfortunately, most of those bills either did not pass or got tabled.
Do you think that they're worried that their property values are going to be decreased for their own personal?
No, I think that they're worried that what will happen is that there will be a lot more people, and that the nature of the environment in which they live is going to change. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, I've watched this happen in a number of different places, because I've lived over in Europe, which is very different from here. I lived in the Raleigh-Durham area when they were growing rapidly. A whole nother ball of wax. Not a great solution either.
Talking about sprawl?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I think what people want is they want to retain their quality of life, but at the same time, they want more people to move to New Hampshire, and they want to get businesses to come here, and they want to grow. And there's a lot of areas in New Hampshire where you can't do that. There's no more room for people to buy land. There's no more room for people to build houses, because the rural nature of it has essentially prohibited this. And it's gotten to the point where a lot of these towns, they have small town centers, and you couldn't rebuild the town center if it was destroyed in a hurricane or a tornado, because it violates all of the local zoning and planning ordinances. Mm-hmm. Because these were all grandfathered in because they were built in another time, and now you couldn't rebuild them unless you got a bunch of variances. And so I think if we want to move forward and we want to retain the character of New Hampshire, but we want to grow the population, and we want to grow, have businesses move here and improve the state revenues, improve the quality of employment in the state, and the quality of life here, then we're going to have to make a choice. Because you can do what North Carolina did, and you can sprawl everywhere. I wouldn't recommend that. Uh, it I mean, it's nice enough. I lived in one of the developments in South Durham. That's where I bought my first house. It was nice. It was not a terrible life. But if you want to live in a rural area, if you want to live in a rural environment, you can't do that because that removes the rural environment. It paves over basically everything. Like we had a strip of woods behind us and across the street, and that was it. Mm-hmm. So if you want to retain a rural environment, you've got to do what the Europeans do, which is, and I don't think they did this consciously. It's just the way that things worked out historically with Europe. And what they have is they have concentrated cities and then rural areas that are relatively low population. And if you want to have concentrated cities, then you need to enable people to build commercial and residential at the same time. And you'll notice that one of the issues with the United States in general, and with North Carolina specifically, and with New Hampshire specifically, is that zoning doesn't allow that. There's a specific the zoning, the entire concept is that we're going to zone this area to be this, and then because that's what we think it should be, and that's the way it's going to be. And so what you end up with is South Willow Street, which is a huge street, enormous amounts of traffic, all of these businesses lined up, and then residential areas where people have to drive in order to get to that. So if you like that model, keep going with the current zoning because that's the way it's going to happen. Most of southern New Hampshire has been essentially suburbanized over time. I know people have talked about there used to be orchards in the Londonderry area. They're all gone. They all got replaced by suburban housing developments. And so if we keep going with the current zoning, that's what's going to happen, is that slowly things are going to convert into this, I guess you could call it leafy suburban model, because that's the only thing that the current zoning and planning really allows. And so I think if people want to retain the character of living in rural New Hampshire, then they're going to need to do something about that.
Does it do anything would that do anything as far as affordability for housing? Because I think that's probably one of the biggest drivers. Because I saw a house for sale in one of the towns around here. It was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath. It probably a manufactured home. It looked like single story with a full basement on 5 acres, and it was $480,000. And that's a home for somebody that has a good sized family, but I don't know too many people unless both people, the mother and the father, have exceptionally well jobs. They're making $100,000 a piece, I would think. Those are the type of people that could really afford that. It's not going to be anybody. I don't know anybody in their 20s that are doing that.
So the answer to that is yes, some. The driving factor, especially when it comes to real estate, is demand. So demand is composed of a number of different things, but one of those things is people who shouldn't actually be here. So removing illegal immigrants from the equation will help. I don't think there's anybody who disagrees with that, because they're consuming housing. They tend to consume housing on the lower levels, but all that means is that people who need housing on the lower levels don't get it. So okay, and adding to the housing supply will help some. But I'll tell you, I don't think that we can build our way out of it. No. Because it would require an enormous amount of building and an enormous amount of density, and we just don't have that. And so I don't think demand is going to go down very far. Now, that being said, there's plenty of places in New Hampshire where you can buy a house for a reasonable amount of money. Berlin, for example, right? But people don't want to buy a house in Berlin because it's not close to anywhere, and they don't want to live there. So
the houses up in Berlin have gone up substantially.
They have,
because you used to be able to get one for $50,000 to $100,000 up there, and now they're $250,000. And there's no industry up there unless you want to work at the prison.
So even they are affected by demand, but not nearly as much as everyone else.
It's been like that statewide. It's been like that nationwide, really.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, I believe a lot of that has to do with illegal immigration. If you even go by the lowest estimates of the number of people that the Democrats have brought in, it's like 10 million people.
Yeah.
And the higher estimates are in the 30 to 40 million range. So, if it's one of the higher estimates, let's say it's 30 million people, that's a huge amount of demand. And so that has a big effect. And it's because housing is a relatively what's the right word? I want to say viscous, but that's not the right word. It's a relatively not static, but it's a slow moving market. It takes time to build houses. It takes time to build developments, especially larger ones. It takes time to build the roads. It takes time to build the infrastructure. Like there's a big lag between I'm going to build a house and I'm moving in. Right, it can be years.
We had a housing crisis in 2008, and the lowest median housing price was in 2014. So it took 6 years for it to actually.
Yeah, it took 6 years for it to fully work itself out.
Yeah,
and honestly, maybe it didn't even then. At that point, because they were still trying to get people to buy houses. So it definitely dipped down, but I don't think it went down to where it should have been because of all of the market skewing effects, especially the federals.
Do you think that the price increases could be related to monetary policy too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Inflation is always there.
I would say that would be more the driving factor. I know, obviously, if you have 10 or 20 million extra people here, that's almost like the end of World War II when we brought all the troops home. But we weren't putting those people on welfare when they came home.
Exactly.
And that's the biggest thing. I mean, libertarianism used to have an open border policy, I would think. From what I remember, but you can't have open borders on a welfare state.
And there are plenty of libertarians who recognize that. Like I'm being a libertarian, I'm like, yeah, the government shouldn't be able to control where people live, but that comes with a caveat, right? You can't then put them on welfare. You can't have the government support them. You can't have, there needs to be private property rights. You can't, if they move on to someone's property, then that person should be allowed to remove them. So there's a whole, the government not controlling where people live. There's a whole set of requirements that has to happen before you can get to that point, and we're not even close to that.
No.
So at this point, and you can argue that if a country doesn't control who actually can come and go, then it's not much of a country.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're at, because the Democrats have brought in tens of millions of people, and they did so because they were looking to gain electoral advantage. And I don't think that that's something that should be tolerated.
Do you think they achieved that goal?
Yes, absolutely.
In New Hampshire too, or just in other states?
Less so in New Hampshire, only because we are not a huge target and we're a very small demographic. So, but in other states, absolutely. California probably has 2 House seats that they shouldn't have because the illegals were counted in the census in 2010.
And they're working on getting rid of the illegals being counted in the census too, from the last I heard.
Yes, that is, working on it, but it still hasn't happened despite, Republican majorities in several instances. So,
do you think you're as much of a libertarian today as you were maybe 10 years ago?
That's a good question. Yes, I think I am. In fact, probably more so. Because especially doing this, but even interacting with other things in my life, it's become much more real to me. Like living in New Hampshire and living in a place that has relatively low regulation and relatively low government footprint has been eye-opening, to say the least. We don't make people wear helmets on motorcycles. Do people die in motorcycle accidents? Absolutely. Is it a big deal? Yeah. I mean, we don't want to see people die, but at the same time, they are the ones taking responsibility for wearing a helmet or not wearing a helmet. So nobody is that impetus that oh well, no, there needs to be a law. So there ought to be a law.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there, and that is really refreshing. It is really great to live in a place where the first reaction is not, oh, well, there ought to be a law. And there's certainly plenty of people in New Hampshire who do that, but there are a lot who don't. And living that every day understanding the realistic effort and work that it takes to maintain that, which is part of what I'm doing in the house, kind of makes it more solid, makes it more real, and understanding that yes, this can be accomplished, and we are making progress, and this is definitely better for people who live here.
How much traction has the Free State Project gained since you've come here? Because the goal was 50,000 people, I believe.
The original plan was 20,000. I don't know where the numbers are these days. Probably not there yet, although I don't know how many people have actually moved. I don't know if anybody's keeping track anymore. We got to the number of signers, and then people kept moving, and we're still welcoming people into the state, so I don't know. I think at this point it's beyond like the Free State Project itself, the movement, and what's happening at the political levels and in the social levels is past that. So we have a number of people who are in the Liberty Caucus who are New Hampshire natives. They never moved here. I think what we did was kind of give a shot in the arm to the natural New Hampshire rejection of authority kind of thing. And so now we've probably got, I don't know, somebody counted a while back, but we probably have around 25% of the House reps who are more or less liberty oriented. And so that's a good number. And it's certainly better than anywhere else in the United States, for sure.
So around 100 people.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good number.
Yeah. And if you look at the NHLA ratings, there's probably 100 people who are really highly rated, and there's probably another 50 more who are pretty decent. Mm-hmm. And so that's like the difference between that and North Carolina and other places I've lived is just light years. Like when you're a libertarian and you don't live in New Hampshire, what you're talking about is all supposition. It's all dreams. It's all thinking, because you're not actually accomplishing anything. And in New Hampshire, we are. So, yeah. I mean, have we taken over the state government like the Democrats allege? I wish, right?
There's a lot of fear-mongering going on about the Free State Project right now. And yeah. I've seen a lot of it in the last week or two, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, granted, there's a group, I won't say their name, but yeah, there's people who definitely dislike us because they're the people who say there ought to be a law all the time. Mm-hmm. Like and I've said this about people before. The divide between libertarians and other people is that there's many other people, and I'm not saying that this is bad. It has a lot to do with environment and how people are raised and what they, the actual culture, but when it comes to society and people interacting in society, the only way that they see to make changes to society is through government. Yeah. There is no other option. Like if they think that, for example, let's say that we want people to be safe on motorcycles, the first thing they go to, and the only thing they go to, is, well, we should make a law to make people have various, safety equipment and do inspections and, all of this to make people safer on motorcycles. So the concept of having a private organization that encourages that or provides training for people or anything like that just simply doesn't cross their mind, because government is how society interacts. Government is how society operates. And libertarians are the opposite. We're like, government should be the last option because it's usually the worst. It's almost always the worst. And so what you should do is leave people as free as you can to do what they want to do, and then people can choose for themselves how they want to handle things and if they want to group together to try to make a change to their society.
The same thing goes for the gun debate. They want to pass gun control all the time, and they demonize the NRA, but the NRA puts out more educational literature, and every gun safety class you have, not everyone, but most of them are sponsored by the NRA.
And the ones that aren't are sponsored by the insurance companies, USCCA and the others.
So it's just a strange argument that there always should be a law to stop people from doing things, but in the end, when somebody gets killed because they were riding on the motorcycle or there was a shooting accident, it's not because the government wasn't there to protect them. It's there because they weren't educated enough to protect themselves.
Or they didn't want to, or they were careless, or there's lots of reasons for that, and a lot of those reasons are not reasons that you can deal with in the law, or even personally one-on-one trying to influence somebody. You get somebody who's careless or somebody who wants to hurt themselves, you're not going to stop them.
We can never have this happen again. You always hear stuff like that,
but it will
if it saves just one life. But then they'll promote policies that cost lives all the time.
Right. COVID was a perfect example. If it saves one life, we'll mandate the vaccines. Well, the vaccines are killing people. And you can see the brain freeze.
We're not going to talk about that.
It's a mindset where the government can, any government program can do no wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If the government does it, it must be right.
So here's a good one. If you're a libertarian and you believe that, what is your view on abortion?
I probably shouldn't answer. I might make some Republicans mad. So my view on abortion is this. If the baby is a person from the point of conception, then the baby has no right to the resources of the mother. Now, that being said, that means that the mother can cut the baby off from those resources at any time, if you want to be specifically legal about it. Now, that obviously ignores the fact that the mother was the one who put the baby in that position. So I think, and the reason I support the current New Hampshire laws is because it's a compromise. And I think it's probably the compromise that most people are okay with.
Is it 12 weeks in New Hampshire?
It's
or 16?
24.
It's 24.
Yeah, so you can get an abortion before 24 weeks, which essentially means that if the baby is viable, then it probably should be allowed to be born. So all of that being said, I think abortion is a really awful thing to do, and if I would really strongly encourage anyone who's considering doing it to consider the consequences of what you're doing, because it's no more and no less than it actually kind of falls into the same category as defensive shootings, right? Do I want to kill the person who broke into my house and is threatening me? No, I don't want to kill them. But if I have to, then I will. Does that mean that there's no consequences for me? No, it doesn't. And plenty of people who have been involved in defensive shootings can tell you this. It's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing. And abortions are worse because most people do it, and bogus Planned Parenthood statistics aside, most people do it because it's inconvenient. They either think they can't afford a baby, or they don't want a baby right now, or they're not in a good position to have a baby. And I think those are really terrible reasons to do something like that.
I agree.
I would really encourage people not to do it. So do I think it should be legal? Yes. Do I think it's a horrible thing to do? Yes. And that people should avoid it as much as possible. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I mean, 24 weeks, that's a 6-month-old baby.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it is.
That's a big fetus. So that's
that is a baby that would probably survive if it was born at that moment.
I mean, with medical technology today, I'm pretty sure that they could keep a baby alive a lot earlier than that, too.
Yeah.
I think it was Rand Paul said at 4 or 5 month old, he was going in to operate on a baby, on a woman that was like on her second trimester, and like the baby's grabbing his hand as he's working on it, which is pretty
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and to go a little bit further on that. So let me talk about my son for a bit. I adopted my son when he was 9. This was in North Carolina. And if the people who are proponents of abortion probably would have said that he should have been aborted, because he was born to a set of parents who already had a couple of other kids. They were not well off. They were not in good shape mentally and physically. They really couldn't handle another kid. They tried and they failed. I've met them, I've talked to them quite a bit about this, and they were open about it. They're like, we couldn't handle it. So people who are proponents of abortion said, well, he should have just been aborted. He shouldn't have. But we adopted him, and he became my son, and he, he had a life. And I really think that, when people who support abortion talk about that, they leave out the fact that, they're not only are they killing these babies because it's convenient or because they can't handle it, they're also they're terminating everything that person could have been. Like the Clint Eastwood movie. You kill somebody, you not only take what they've got, but you take everything they're ever gonna have, right? And it's something that I don't think people should be doing. Even if that kid turns out to be, not a great person, he turns out to be a criminal, that's not your call. You shouldn't be making calls like that.
Right. Yeah, I've had somebody make that argument with me before because they lived in an urban area and actually, and they were saying that people are so poor that they're better off not being born. And I think to myself, like, why do you get to say that? And that's a strange thing to say about other people. Like, would you say that about yourself? Would you not want to be born?
I was born into an extremely poor family. I don't think that would have been a reason
poor is better
to
than
not
dead.
Be born. No. And if you go back 100, 150 years, most people were born into really poor families. By today's standards, incredibly poor. Mm-hmm. Yet they grew up to be, on the balance, good people. Right.
It's crazy how big families were like 100 years ago, and conditions were a lot worse back then. And now things are better than. I mean, they're pretty good considering we're the top 1% of the world. If you're an American, you're pretty lucky, and we're having smaller families.
We are the richest society that has ever lived in the history of the world.
Yeah.
If you are born into a poor family in Baltimore, you have better living conditions and better options than nobility did in, say, 1300.
Yeah.
Like you have air conditioning, you have running water, you have electricity, you have things that they couldn't even dream of having.
Yeah.
And it boggles my mind that people think that we're poor. I mean, can people be poor? Yes, but it's not a question of and this is going to sound crazy, but it's not a question of finances. It's a question of attitude, because plenty of people didn't have a lot in the past in America, yet they had a life and they were happy. You don't have to have a lot to be happy. And a lot of people today have a lot more than they did, and they're very unhappy.
I do think we need to tackle monetary policy.
Okay.
I think that is like one of the biggest things, that a group of people can make decisions that make all your wealth basically disappear by printing money.
The Federal Reserve is an abomination and is going to destroy the United States.
They're doing a good job at it. I agree. And I think that the reason why we have $500,000 houses that used to cost $150,000 to $200,000 just probably 10 years ago is because of how much money we've been printing.
Absolutely.
So the biggest thing that we need to do is get spending under control.
I don't even like to characterize it as printing money. What it is stealing. It's because what you're doing is you are stealing from all the people who have the current money. Mm-hmm. When you do that, you're printing a bunch of money yourself. You're essentially a counterfeiter, but legalized, and you're stealing from everybody else in the country. Mm-hmm. And they've been doing it for many years. As far as I know, they're going to continue doing it until the country collapses, because they don't seem to be able to stop.
The average inflation rate's 2%. And
that's a lot. That's a lie.
Yeah, but even if it is 2%, if you've been saving for 50 years, you've lost 100% of your buying power.
Yeah,
that should really enrage people. Like, what's the point of even having the dollars? You're not supposed. It's no different than when a crypto comes out, and you're one of the first people to get in on it, and it's gonna go down unless it's Bitcoin. It seems to be, or Ethereum, one of the only two that have gone up. But
well, that's not entirely true, but. We can talk about Bitcoin in a minute. Let's go back to Fed.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't see things changing anymore. I don't think there's any appetite at the level, and I think what happens with inflation, if it's kept low, is it kind of sneaks up on people. Like, People think the Fed does have a target of 2%. Inflation's been generally higher than that. And it just happens so slowly that people don't really notice that their wealth is being stolen, that everything that they've worked for is being stolen. And you saw in 2022 when inflation spiked because of all the COVID spending. People were like, whoa, this is terrible. What's going on? Why is this happening? Prices are going way up. And I don't have... So any inflation that occurs at a level that basically is that level, anything like in the 4 to 5% range, people notice.
Yeah.
Anything that's higher than that, generally causes revolutions and governments to collapse.
Not this time.
I think the theory of the Fed is that we can tolerate 2%. In fact, some people will argue that 2% is good because it allows the monetary base to expand and keeps the economy expanding. I don't think that's good at all. Not to mention the fact that the Fed doesn't seem to ever be able to actually get 2%. They're either over or under, and they're way too slow in responding because it's an impossible problem. There's too much money. There's too many people. There's too many things involved. In fact, what we saw in the 2008 housing crisis, and I think what we saw with COVID, is that I think the U.S. economy and the world economy is much, much bigger than these people think, because they tried all of this monetary policy to make these changes, and it essentially bounced. Now, there was some inflation in the U.S., but didn't last. Why didn't it last? That was a lot of money that they threw out at people.
Quantitative easing. You're talking about 2008, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But 2008 was a lot of money that went to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there should have been a lot of inflation. And there was a little bit, but not very much. Not as much as you would expect. And then during COVID, they spent a lot of money, and a lot of people weren't working, and there was a lot of other factors involved, and there was a significant amount of inflation, and then it kind of tapered off. And now it's up, but it's not where it was. So what causes that to happen? Why would that stuff go down when the feds are still spending multiple trillions in deficit every year? So why aren't we inflating like crazy? And I think the answer to that is because the economy is much larger than they think.
Okay.
And it's much more difficult. Like FDR in the 1930s, they could really screw over the economy by raising taxes and spending and trying to, redirecting all this money into useless things. You really can't do that anymore because the U.S. economy and the world economy is so big that the power of the government to actually affect that has been reduced.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. Now, can they still cause problems? Absolutely. And will they cause the U.S. government to collapse? Eventually, yes. Because at some point, especially with crypto, and we'll talk about the crypto stuff, especially with crypto coming into play, if people are careful about what crypto they accept and what crypto they're willing to work with, i.e., don't use government-issued crypto. That should be obvious to anyone. But as long as people are good about that, the ability of governments to control the money supply is actually dropping. And that's nothing but good. But
do you think because people are transferring their dollars into crypto?
I think so, yeah. It's not a huge amount, but crypto offers the opportunity to do that, it offers an off-ramp for people who want to get out from under that control. And of course, which is why the government is proposing, central bank digital currencies and things like that.
Is this why they made gold illegal way back when?
Yes.
Okay.
Same reason. Yeah. Gold was if you I don't know how much you're into history of gold and stuff like that, but one of the big issues with gold that became readily apparent is it put a huge brake on people's ability to raise armies and fight wars, because you had a certain amount of gold and you could spend it on that, but when you spend it, you didn't have it anymore. And eventually that would come back to bite you. And the fact that governments got the ability to print as much money as they want has been one of the factors that has supported an enormous amount of military aggression and war and all kinds of other problems that come with that over the last 100 years or so. And that really took off in the beginning of the 20th century, and then it's been kind of simmering ever since.
With the creation of central banks?
Yeah. Central banks are the reason that large-scale wars are possible.
They're the ones that fund them. Yeah. They fund both sides of them. Yeah.
I love that meme where you see the rockets coming up from Gaza,
yeah.
and then you see the Iron Dome coming, and it says, my tax dollars. It's somehow also my
Yeah,
tax dollars.
I've seen those.
Yeah.
You see them every couple of weeks whenever there's a new bombing going on.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So what about crypto? What did you want to get into about
Oh,
crypto?
so the interesting thing to me is that Bitcoin is as popular as it is because
Why?
Bitcoin was the initial proof of concept.
Okay.
Like if you read Satoshi's paper, it's the minimum functional system, and there was a lot of uncertainty about exactly what needed to be done and how anonymous it was, and they kind of were like, well, this is the only way we can figure out right now for this to work, so we're just going to put it together and see what happens. And so usually when you have the initial viable product, it's like it's the first thing you do, and then as a technology company, you put out that product, and then people either like it or don't like it, and then you build on it, you iterate on it. And what's happened is that some of that iteration has happened, but not a lot. So Bitcoin, as it stands today, is pretty much the same as it was, in 2012, 2014, and it's extraordinarily popular. And I think it has its place, but it's probably going to be eclipsed at some point by something that's more flexible, that has better privacy features and that sort of thing. Yeah, maybe not replaced. Replaced at the retail level. Like Bitcoin, I think will always have a place because sometimes you do need public ledger. Like for example, if I want to do a transfer to another country and I want everybody to see it, right? Then I can send them Bitcoin, and everybody will know this is my address, this is their address, this is how much they got. Done deal, right? You can't hide that. It's the same way. It's actually similar to gold. When people transfer gold, it's very difficult to hide. Why, yes, we did in fact give this other country, all of this gold because of the debts or whatever that we had.
But my understanding of it, and I'm not an expert on it at all, but so every crypto, you store it in a wallet, right?
Typically, yes.
Typically. And that has an address, and anybody that knows that address can see what's in that wallet.
When it comes to Bitcoin, yes.
In Ethereum, right? The Ethereum network.
To a certain extent, yes.
I mean, there's so many networks now, I've lost count. So are there any that you can actually hide your assets?
Yes and no. There are ones that have much better privacy features, Xano, Dash, Monero. But the thing about the addresses is, okay, so you have an address. You can see the address. Who controls that address? Who has the private key to that address?
Whoever owns keys, right?
Right. So who is that? How do you find that out?
It's not linked to anybody.
Right.
Which gives you the privacy.
Well, it's kind of pseudo-anonymity because there are things you can do. For example, if I send you a Bitcoin, I think it's at 107 right now. So I send you a Bitcoin, I give you $100,000. So I send it to this address. I'm assuming it's you because it's the address you gave me, right? So it's controlled by you. We know that. Everybody else just sees an address. Mm-hmm. But if you then turn around and take that money and that money and sell it for dollars at, say, Coinbase, right? Well, then everybody knows who you are, right? Because Coinbase receives that transaction. They give that money to you. The government sees that transfer because it's $100,000. They're monitoring it. And they know that you were the one who sold that Bitcoin, and therefore that address belongs to you. Now, the thing about Bitcoin that I think a lot of people don't understand is you're not limited to one address.
Right.
You can create other addresses, and you can move Bitcoin to those. And you can then, there's various techniques you can you can transfer that stuff around, mix those together with other Bitcoins, and then split them out again. And you can hide the origin of where those Bitcoins came from, because Bitcoins are to a certain extent fungible. Now there are some problems with that because a number of accounts are now controlled by the federal government, and so there's some limitations to that. But that's the basic theory, is that as long as you don't do something that connects that address to the world, to you, then it's much harder to say, oh well, this is that person. Now, what people will do is they'll advertise an address. They say, this is my address. Well, okay, you just connected that address to you. Mm-hmm. You don't have to do that. So it gives you a little bit of pseudonymity, but it's not It's not perfect. And if people want to find out, they can, because at some point you're going to interact with the real world, and then they'll be able to connect that to you. If I use Bitcoin to buy a car, right, the Bitcoin transaction is going to be pseudo anonymous. But the fact that I now have a new car is not.
Right.
Because I'm going to have to go register it, and that will be immediately obvious that I was the one that bought that, and I must have bought it with Bitcoin. Therefore, that address now belongs to me.
This is like Goodfellas.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. If your wife's running around with a mink coat, they're going to know.
Yeah.
You
At
got
a certain
some money.
point, it becomes obvious. Like, if I ever become a millionaire, there will be signs.
Yeah.
Right. But Bitcoin, again, was never designed to be private. It was never designed for that. It was the minimum viable product that Satoshi put out. It was like, I think this will work.
Mm-hmm.
And it did. And it's still working, which is amazing to me, because when you understand some of the underpinnings, you're like, but it works because people are self-interested in it working.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know how much you know about this, but there's the 50% attack, where if you are able to influence or gain control over more than 50% of the hashing power, you can actually control what Bitcoin transactions are made.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that could potentially be a problem. And so what the big miners do is they divide things up, and they never get close, because they know that if somebody gets close to 51%, then that brings the whole system into question, and they don't want to do that. So they are incentivized to make sure that doesn't happen. So the system as it stands right now is built on, I think, more or less good incentives. The real question is what's going to happen when the 21 million limit is reached, because Bitcoin in the code has a fixed limit on the number of Bitcoins. Many of those have been lost. There's still plenty out there, and because Bitcoin can be split up, it doesn't actually matter that much. But there's already some discussion about changing that 21 million limit. And if that happens, that's going to be a huge issue. And the reason they're talking about it is because they don't think that the miners can survive just on transaction fees.
How can they do that, though?
Change the code.
Just change the code.
Yeah. So the whole system is built on consensus.
Where's the main code hosted?
Bitcoin Core.
Okay.
So there's a set of core developers, which some people have issues with. We won't talk about that, but there's a set of developers who maintain that code base, and they essentially make the decisions about what's going to happen, and then it's written in the code. So they could change that. For example, they could change the block size, which has been a topic of huge amounts of discussion over the years, because the Bitcoin block size is not very large, and it limits the number of transactions to a pretty low number.
Is that why people say it's slow?
Yeah. The slowness, it's not so much that there's kind of two aspects to it. There's how long it takes to confirm a transaction, which Bitcoin, again, being the minimum viable product, is not particularly great at. It can take 10 or 15 minutes, even on a good day, in the perfect conditions for you to actually complete a transaction. But it's more about the slowness they're talking about in general is throughput, bandwidth. The number of transactions that Bitcoin can support, even if all of the blocks are maxed out, everybody's doing transactions, we're putting as much through the system as we can, is very limited. And so what you'll see is when the transaction volume gets too high, then it's either much slower to get a transaction approved, or it just doesn't happen, which is a big problem.
So what gives Bitcoin the $100,000 value that it has now?
Because it was first.
Just because it was first.
Yeah. And it works. The system works. It's not particularly great in terms of performance and these other things, but it does work. And funnily enough, one of the ways you know that is because criminals use it all the time. And there's all this stuff about people holding, the people hold people's computers ransom for Bitcoin.
Right.
They'll all this stuff. The criminals grabbed onto it right away because they realized that in some instances it was better than cash. Right. Some guy in Russia can encrypt your hard drive and send you an email that says, hey, pay me 2 Bitcoins or whatever, and I'll decrypt your hard drive. Now, could he do that with cash? No, because he lives in Russia and we live in New Hampshire. But he can do that with Bitcoin because Bitcoin is worldwide. Mm-hmm. And so they quickly realized that in some cases it's much better than cash.
Now,
In other cases, it's not.
because that guy's in Russia, do you think he doesn't have to worry about taking that and converting it into cash?
He does. He absolutely does.
So how does he get around that as a hacker if it's
he will
pseudo-anonymous?
sometimes run it through a mixer. They will sometimes have a third party handle the transaction. For example, like so the hacker, he gets the Bitcoin to a specific address. He gives someone else the private key and says, "Take this, go sell it to someone else, right? And give me the cash." So a lot of times what they'll do is they have brokers who will trade cash for Bitcoin, even tainted Bitcoin that's been involved in transactions like this, because they know that they can put it through a mixer or other issues. There's other ways to clean it.
Tornado Cash, is that one of them? I've heard of that one.
It's one of them. Yeah.
They threw that guy in jail, though, didn't they?
I'm not sure. I don't remember what happened in the end of the story. But there's other places and other ways to do that. But usually they just trade that Bitcoin for cash, and that way, well, then it's traded to another account, another account number, and who owns that? We don't know. And then it goes to somewhere else, and it goes to somewhere else, and people lose track of it.
So are you heavy into crypto?
I am, yeah.
Now, is it just Bitcoin that you get into, or?
No, I try to keep tabs on everything. I'm not actively involved with a lot of the other projects because what I want to see is which project actually takes over as the day-to-day cash. I don't think Bitcoin is suited for that. I don't think it ever will be. I think it has its place, especially in large transfers between large entities. But I really want to see something that people can use day to day. And there's definitely projects out there that can do that.
Is XRP one of those?
Is that Ripple?
It's so. On the Ripple network, yeah. I believe so.
My answer to that would be no.
Because I've heard that, but I don't know enough. So you can tell me why.
Ripple's big problem is that they are privately controlled.
Right.
And so you can argue about that, and there may be a place for that. But everything about the system rests on Ripple remaining a viable entity, whereas Bitcoin is not like that. As long as people are willing to mine, as long as people are willing to do different things, like Bitcoin could collapse tomorrow, and the only miners who are left are people running computers, and they're just mining on the CPU, and it drops way back down, right? But it'll still work as long as people are participating in the network. Mm-hmm. It doesn't require a specific entity to survive. And the problem with requiring a particular entity is that entity can be pressured. Wherever they're located, they are subject to the laws in that country. And so it would be all too easy for them to do things behind the scenes to, for example, print currency or manipulate currency in ways that the local government wants them to do and not tell people who are involved. I mean, that's the problem that got us here in the first place, right? Is the Federal Reserve printing money and stealing from people who own money. Mm-hmm. And the exact same thing could happen with a private entity, possibly without people even knowing. Because we know how many Bitcoins are out there because it's on the network. The private networks, not so much. And the privacy-oriented networks, Xano, Monero, Dash, it's even harder to see exactly what's out there. So it's extraordinarily important, in my view at least, in that case, to make sure that whatever gets used for that is something that operates on a consensus model and does not require a centralized organization. And Ripple violates that. So
yeah, I have a friend that is into Ripple, and his argument is that exact argument for it, is that it's on a private. It's I don't know if it's a hedge fund that runs it or what, but that was what he liked about it. He doesn't like the idea that if he sends something to a wallet, it can be gone just because he hit the wrong number or wrong letter. It terrifies him.
Well, okay.
But that's why.
And maybe there's a place for both, right? I'm okay with that. I want competition. Monetary competition is something that hasn't happened. I mean, it still happens at the international level, which helps with balancing out some of the stuff that the national governments like to do, but it hasn't stopped multiple national governments from essentially suiciding their currencies, like Zimbabwe did. And more competition in the currency market, in my mind, is a good thing. Yeah. Because that means that if somebody does something really stupid, the other systems can pick up the slack.
I agree with that. You should be able to pay people in any way that you want, barter and trade, gold, silver, whatever.
Eggs.
Eggs, yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
There was almost an egg economy there for a bit.
But they can't tax that the way that they can tax dollar.
That's
of
course, being a libertarian, I see that as a plus.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not a lot of people agree with that, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, I've got into a little bit of crypto, but I always buy in when it's too late. By the time it's popular, once people start talking about it, then
it's too late.
It's too late, Yeah.
But that's okay. I mean, what we really should want is for people to be able to use it.
Yeah.
Day to day. And, I'd really like to see people getting paid in crypto. I like to see people using crypto to buy groceries, buy gas. All these things can be done today, and it's easier than it used to be, but it's still not at the level where mass adoption is possible. And that's really the goal, is we want to see people able to use crypto just in their day-to-day lives, and understand that this is money that won't lose value.
Wouldn't it be illegal too, under today's laws, to use crypto? Because I think there was somebody in Las Vegas or something that tried to pay his help in gold bullion, and the IRS came in and shut him down. That was years ago.
So the answer is kind of. And what ends up happening is, as long as you are, as far as legally, as long as you are calculating things in dollars, and you are charging sales tax, and you are paying your business taxes. We don't have sales tax in New Hampshire for the most part, but assume that you're somewhere else in the country that has that. As long as you do that, they can't really stop you. So what ends up happening is people end up calculating things in dollars and then paying in crypto, and then the whoever receives the crypto will convert that to dollars if they need to. And then, of course, there's a whole bit of arbitrage there where you're, am I converting it to dollars at the same exchange rate that it was when I traded for it? And, but no, it's actually worth a little bit more now, so I have to, be careful about how much value I'm actually accumulating in terms of dollars, although it's really the dollars getting less valuable, but whatever. So yeah, as long as you are doing your books and taking care to pay your taxes, they really can't stop you. But on the other hand, if you are actually trying to work in crypto and you're paying in crypto, you can't pay your taxes in crypto. So at some point, you're going to have to convert some of that to dollars to actually pay your taxes. And there will be questions about, well, okay, did those assets appreciate during that time? How much, then you get into really gnarly tax territory with exactly what you've got and how much you've got and how much you earned in interest or whatever. Like much of the problem with this is that the IRS has no idea how to deal with crypto. And that's actually why Roger Ver is still in jail, is because he tried to follow the law and they wouldn't tell him what the law was because they didn't know themselves. Who? They had no idea what he was talking about. Roger Ver.
Who's that?
He was a big Bitcoin proponent. About 10, 15 years ago, he was using Bitcoin to do various things. And I don't know all of the details, but I know that he tried to work with the government and say, okay, what are the rules for me to pay my taxes? I want to pay. And they wouldn't tell him, and then they put him in jail.
Do you know who Richard Hart is?
No.
The Pulse Chain. He launched Pulse Chain a couple of years ago, and he actually has one called Hex, and that one came out in 2019. It did pretty well. But he had a case with the SEC that he just beat.
Oh, good.
Yeah, because I think they were trying to say that he defrauded people that invested, or he had a thing called a sacrifice, so you could send him crypto to fund the Pulse Chain project. And then he was posting all these pictures in these stupid hats and uniform outfits and driving around Lamborghinis. So it's like, okay, well, you just stole everybody's money. And so they tried to say he defrauded the people that had sacrificed, but Pulse Chain did come out and people did get get what they were supposed to get for it. The price is not nearly as good as people thought it was going to be. But
caveat emptor.
and I bought into that. And my wallet was doing pretty good until the SEC actually sued him, and then it just tanked. So
Yeah. Well, there was a.
they did more harm to my to my portfolio than him posting dumb pictures on Twitter. But it was he just beat the case, and but I don't know, maybe the damage is done.
Well, a lot of damage has been done. I don't know if you know about Library and Odyssey.
No.
There was a video site that had a blockchain built in, and this was local in New Hampshire. There were people in New Hampshire who were running this, and the SEC essentially put them out of business because what they were claiming is that they were, I forget the exact claims, but basically that they were defrauding people by giving them, and none of it made any sense. And but they put them out of business just by the lawfare. I don't think anything ever. I think there was a judgment, but it wasn't a huge deal, or it wasn't exactly. The SEC wanted to shut everything like that down. It didn't happen, but it certainly put Library and Odyssey out of business. So they're still around. I think that because they're running as a volunteer project, but the company that was behind it that was trying to use the blockchain to do videos and stuff just was destroyed.
The SEC is supposed to be there to protect.
Yeah, and instead they're destroying people because what the argument, of course, is that crypto is a big scam, which there has been plenty of scam activity.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing: nobody's forcing anybody to do anything. So
right, it's all voluntary.
If you're going into crypto with the expectation that you're going to get rich, and you don't get rich, you lose a bunch of money. Well, you know what?
It's on you.
Like, I'm sorry, but you knew that it was risky. And you took that risk and you failed. This is something that ties back to the whole Federal Reserve and the issues with bailing out companies. Because what's happened is anybody associated with the government is insulated from financial risk.
Yeah,
which is insane because what they're doing is they're putting the risk off onto everybody else. So I want to see people. If you take a risk and it fails, then you should lose your money.
Yeah.
And that's the way
there shouldn't be anything.
It should be when it comes to finance.
There shouldn't be anything. The term "too big to fail" shouldn't even exist.
No, shouldn't exist.
And that was what pissed everybody off during the 2008 financial crisis. They were putting out loans that they shouldn't have, and you put out a bad loan, you take that risk, and it shouldn't be on taxpayers to.
But it was.
Unfortunately,
and we all paid the price.
Yeah, and with as far as the whole Richard Hart thing went, I was following him in the leading up to Pulse, and this is actually kind of a funny story. He was the one that was always saying, not your keys, not your crypto. So he was the one that, and a friend of mine that introduced me to him, introduced me to the idea of having a wallet and taking it off of Coinbase and taking it off of Robinhood and all these
Absolutely.
and actually having custody of your own crypto. And I was telling that to my buddy who was all into SHIB at the time, and he had a lot of money in SHIB, but he kept it right on the exchange he bought it on. And I said, yeah, you should get a wallet. So he started looking into it. He opened up a wallet. He transferred everything, and that exchange that he was using went under, and he would have lost everything if he didn't do that.
Yep.
I had money on Cryptopia back in the day, and that was just a website you went. It was an exchange, and I think the government came in and seized it all, and then everybody lost all their money.
Yep. Yeah. So, self-custody is one of the huge benefits of crypto because you can hold physical dollars.
Yeah.
But that's actually a very tiny amount of the dollars that are in circulation.
Yeah.
Everything else is custodial. It's the banks, and the funny part about it is. If you know anything about banks, if you've ever worked with them, you'd realize that essentially the entire American monetary system is built on a really complex set of spreadsheets that nobody's really keeping track of very well.
Fractional reserve currency.
It's not just that. It's that it's all sort of what's the right term? It's not arbitrary, but it has no. There's no verification system. So you'll see these stories of like, oh, this guy got $1 million deposited into his bank account and he went wild and spent all this stuff. Yeah, how did that happen? Well, somebody fudged a number. Well, how is it possible that you can fudge a number and have that happen and have it go through and nobody notice, right? Well, it's because the whole system is just people putting in numbers. And if somebody, like what the Federal Reserve basically does is go into the spreadsheet, and when they want to create money, they just change the numbers. There's no restriction on that, which is mind-boggling, and it's very hard to realize because so many people put so much effort into accounting and making sure that, if you're a business or you're a home, you're keeping track of your own money. The government doesn't work that way, as we should know at this point. Like the Pentagon doesn't know where trillions of dollars have gone.
Right.
And so it's like, yeah, it's just people putting numbers in the spreadsheets, and they screw up all the time. It's like, oh.
If you did your own finances like that, you can end up in jail.
Oh, you will end up in jail, no question. But when the government does it, it's perfectly fine. So one of aside from getting out from under the thumb of the Federal Reserve and everything else, one of the big advantages of crypto is that it actually has a structure. There is cryptographic verification of transactions. You can't say, oh, I sent you, I sent you 2 Bitcoins yesterday. You should have gotten them. Did you not get them? I sent them. No, it doesn't work. We know you may have put the transaction in, but it didn't get approved. It didn't make it through. So they're either sent or they're not sent. There's none of this, we don't know where it went, right? We know exactly where it is. We know where it went. You can't send it without cryptographic verification of that transaction, which is a huge upgrade in terms of just the basic functioning of the monetary system. But yeah, we're still a ways out, apparently.
Well, they have a monopoly on the monetary system.
Yeah, and it's very convenient and profitable for them, so they don't want to give it up.
They start wars over it. So do you think that, as far as New Hampshire goes, I mean, we don't have an income tax, but is there any way to address monetary policy within the state that would make it so that people can use other forms of
the best thing that we can do is say, yes, people can use other forms. Don't go after people who use other forms of payment. That's the first thing.
How do we protect them from that? Just pass it to the legislator?
Yeah. There needs to be a law that says, people can use gold.
There ought to be a law.
People can use silver. Well, yes. There needs to be a law that says that the state cannot interfere with transactions.
Okay.
Right? So like the Second Amendment, the Second Amendment is not the amendment that gives us our right to bear arms. The Second Amendment restricts the government from infringing on our natural right to bear arms. So what you do is you phrase it as, we have a natural right to compute. We have a natural right to transact. We have a natural right to use whatever payment is agreeable with the person who's on the other end of that transaction, and the state is not allowed to interfere with that. That's the law that we need to pass. And it would probably have to be a constitutional amendment to the New Hampshire Constitution. But it's that would be the single thing that we could do that would be best in terms of protecting people who want to use other monetary systems, who want to get out from under the dollar.
And is that the first step towards doing this? Is there others?
It's not the first step, but it would be very helpful. The first step is just using systems other than the dollar.
I think one of your biggest hurdles is going to be that a lot of people in the state, we have a very elderly state, so
yes.
They have no idea. I mean, I barely know what the hell we're talking about. They sure as hell know. I mean, do you know anybody over 65 that owns crypto?
A few people, but yeah, it's a significant problem.
Yeah.
But I think it's a problem that can be solved. Like but the problem is you need to go to the lowest common denominator. You need to make it so easy to use that people intuitively grasp it, and they don't have to, it's not that different from using dollars. You're just paying in a different form. Like people get it. Like most people, even older folks, they've used another country's currency. Like they understand that they're different currencies.
Yeah.
And so it's just a question of getting them to the point where they can use it. I'm not sure that that's 100% possible, but you don't have to get to 100%. You just need to get to a point where New Hampshire has a buffer between us and the Fed, so that when and if the dollar does crash, that our economy can survive.
Do you think
that's the end goal?
Do you think it will crash?
Absolutely.
Do you have any time frame?
No. So the fundamental problem is they are going to continue to inflate the currency. It's going to continue to get less valuable. They are doing so by borrowing and spending money they don't have, and that is going to stop at some point because it's not sustainable. The American economy is so huge And again, this goes back to that calculation of the size of the economy.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said, well, it should have happened already because we've spent all this money we don't have. Why are people still buying treasuries? Well, because the American economy is still enormously huge and powerful, and they get their money back.
There's not as much. Is there any? There's no other currency that competes with the United States dollar in the same.
No,
It's
not at the same level.
It's the reserve currency of the world. So, like BRICS could potentially be a threat to that, right?
But they'd basically have to start a currency from scratch.
They'd have to start their own
Because
economy.
none of the existing currencies are in any way, shape, or form gonna work for that, right? Like, okay, we can use. Let's say that we're using what do the Russians use?
Ruble.
The ruble. Well, the ruble's not in great shape because of the war and many other things. I mean, they're doing all right, but the ruble's never going to replace the dollar partly because people know that, okay, we replace the dollar with the ruble, so that's even less stable. Like the Russian government is a lot of things, but they're not particularly good at maintaining their own currency. So we're not gaining anything by doing that. So whatever comes after the dollar is going to have to be some kind of improvement, and none of the current competing national currencies are going to do that.
Do you think it'll be a digital currency?
I think so, yeah.
And do you think that they're getting ready for that transition at the Federal Reserve?
No, I don't think they can.
Why?
Because whatever currency comes next is not going to be controllable by the United States. One of the side effects of BRICS, aside from all the other things, is there's a lot of people who don't live in the United States, and they're really sick and tired of the United States controlling the world's money.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever comes after that is going to have to serve them as well. And there's a lot more of them than there are of us. So by weight of sheer numbers, they're going to win. So whatever comes after the U.S. dollar is not going to be something that has direct U.S. control. People just won't accept it. So they can try to put out a digital currency, and I'm sure they will. The question is, will people use it? And people might use it in the United States, but I very much doubt that other people will.
Mm. Do you think it'll be China's currency? They're
No.
the second largest GDP, right?
China's a disaster. You think
Okay.
the U.S. is bad at managing world monetary policy? China would be 100 times worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have no accountability. The thing about China that a lot of people don't understand is that they have this idea that China is this huge, like, economic powerhouse, and they really aren't. They have, if China had even a relatively open, free economy, I won't even say relatively open, a partially open and free economy like the United States does, they should be ahead of the rest of the world in terms of GDP by like a factor of 10. And the fact that they aren't is the reason that they're so bad at this, because they want their cake and they want it to eat it too. And so they are trying to use central control to manage a partially free market system, and it's a disaster. That's how you end up in situations where you build cities in the desert that nobody lives in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, imagine the insanity that has to be in your system for that to even start to occur, let alone be finished. Right? They built entire cities that are empty because their economic indicators and markets are so screwed up.
So in China, there's cities completely empty. They just wasted a bunch of resources and money. So it's not going to be China. Would it be India?
No.
No.
I think it'll be one of the digital currencies that is a consensus effort, because the one thing that is the negative to the dollar is that the U.S. controls it. And so if people want to get away from that, they don't trust any other country to support it. So if you can get a currency that works on consensus and is not controlled by any specific political entity, that's actually ideal. And you can see this, and the route of adoption will be the same as a lot of others, which it will start with the criminal community, because the criminals operate in a world where they are a lot freer to utilize any number of different currencies. So when you see a currency that is preferred by the criminal element, that's usually something that's relatively robust and is is ideal in a lot of ways because it means it's private because criminals don't want to get caught. It means it retains its value because otherwise why would they use it? And it can be used in a relatively private manner. I already touched on that. So those two things are what drives criminals to use currency. It's why they like cash. Cash is anonymous. It's easy until you get to the point where you're moving it around in 18-wheelers. But, that's why there's so much cash in that economy. And so if something gets adopted by the criminal community, that'll be the first indicator. And I think, I forget where I read this, but the next indicator will be stuff that's kind of criminal adjacent. So pornography industry, stuff, the tobacco industry, the gambling. As soon as you see something become usable there, it means it's on its way to becoming adopted.
Interesting. How much pain do you think we'll have here at home once that happens? It's
going to be pretty bad.
Yeah.
The United States is going to survive. The country, the people, New Hampshire is going to survive, no question. The government, on the other hand, probably won't.
What happens with, let's say you have a home and you're mortgaging that home. What happens to you? Nobody knows, right?
It probably depends on who your mortgage is with and whether or not they survive. If they don't survive, you're probably going to retain title to your property. Maybe not. They may get sold off and somebody else buys it. Depends on how that stuff shakes out. We saw some of that after 2008 where, people lost their houses because they stopped paying because it wasn't worth it anymore. And then those houses just sort of went into limbo.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a lot of that sort of legal limbo stuff where people are trying to figure out who owns what.
Yeah.
But if you own your own house, well, then nobody's really going to contest that.
Right.
And so, those people will be fine. And even if you don't, I think if there's a significant collapse at the federal level, it'll be very hard for someone to say, well, Bank of America went under and technically you're in arrears, but, nobody's actually bought up that asset. So, yeah, just stay in your house. Like, what are you going to do?
I wonder if that would happen because, there were a lot of houses that did sit empty. There were
Though a lot of them sat empty because people stopped paying because it wasn't worth it to pay their mortgage anymore.
Yeah.
So if it's the other way, like it would be worth it to pay my mortgage, but I can't because the federal government collapsed and the money is worthless now. Or the money collapses and my mortgage is for $500,000. Well, I can get a wheelbarrow and give you $500,000. Now I own my house, right? Okay.
Yeah. I
Right?
mean, if you have massive inflation and you own your home, then
it'll destroy that market.
Yeah.
And people can then just buy their houses for what amounts to nothing.
But you got to be able to make that money too, because unless you have it already.
Well, but you will, because goods and services still have to happen. People are still going to need to be fed. People are still going to need to be housed. People are still going to need to be clothed. Like even so, if you study the collapse of these of the other countries like Zimbabwe, they started poor, so it made them more poor. But there was a significant amount of starvation because they were so poor and their system wasn't working. But people did survive.
There's enough fluidity in the market for them to survive.
Yeah, they adopt, and the government can have a big impact on that. Will it let people do barter? Will it let people use other currencies? Right? Like if there is still effective governmental control, then you need to make sure that people have that fluidity so that they can do business, so that they can interact and buy food and buy clothes and live their lives. So, yeah, and if the New Hampshire government is careful about that and make sure that that's possible for people, then we'll weather the storm fairly easily.
Foreign governments that rely on us as a reserve currency are probably going to get hurt more.
Probably, yeah.
Because that's what we've seen in the last 10, 15 years. Whenever there's a spike in inflation, it's usually other countries have a higher spike in inflation, like Japan.
Yeah.
And that's what I think Glenn Beck reported that a few years ago once they started seeing like how much TARP money was actually put into the economy. It was like multiple amounts as compared to what they were telling us it was.
Yeah, and a lot of that money went to other countries specifically for that problem.
Yeah.
Trying to help them shore up their other currencies.
Stimulation.
Yep, which doesn't work, but
it doesn't work. I think Thomas Massey had the best presentation in Congress with just a glass of, I think, iced tea or something like that. He said, This is $1. And then he just pours more water. This is what happens when you print more. It dilutes it. And
Yep.
it's such a simple concept to try and understand.
There's too many people who benefit from it.
Yeah. So what do you think the state of New Hampshire looks like in 10 years from now?
I think pretty much the same. Hopefully a little more free, spending a little less money at the state level.
Yeah.
We'll get there eventually, I hope. But otherwise, yeah, I think pretty much the same. We'll probably have a few more people. I think the efforts to remove illegals will probably, for the most part, work. I think a lot of people have already self-deported. So those folks will leave, other folks will come in. And that's where we'll be at. If we're able to attract a few more businesses, we should be better off in terms of businesses and employment. But other than that, it's going to be pretty much the same.
Do you think the midterms are going to be tough?
Yes.
And how do you think Republicans win the midterms? What do they got to do?
Honestly, I don't think it's particularly on us. There are some things that are on us, cutting spending, removing illegals. That's going to have an impact on what happens in the midterms. But I think the national level stuff, like the last election, what's happening at the national level is going to have a huge impact on people's willingness to come out and vote and desire to come out and vote. And I think President Trump has done some things recently that have damaged that, but he's not going to be the one who's running. So the question is, whoever's running needs to be able to tell the American people that, yes, what you voted for in 2024, we did. And their ability to answer that question is going to determine how enthusiastic people are about the midterms, whether or not they come out, and that in turn is going to influence the election heavily.
What do you think? What do you mean by some of the things that Trump has done that's hurt it?
The distraction with attacking Iran.
Yep.
I know there's a big chunk of his electorate that is completely uninterested in more wars.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's threading the needle with that because, yes, he did bomb them, but he's not proposing to do more.
Yeah.
And so that may work out for him.
I'm pretty happy with the way that he pulled back. I wasn't happy when he started bombing them, but I did notice that the older Republicans were all for it.
Yes.
People that they must have been in their 30s or something like that when the hostage situation happened back in the 80s. So they've been told that Iran is our enemy for 40 years, and when Trump's going to bomb them, they're ready to go.
They are our enemy.
Yeah.
The reason why they are is not what people say it is.
Okay.
They're our enemy because we messed with their country rather heavily, and they've never forgiven us for it. And we've supported Israel, who's their opponent, and so, yeah, they're definitely an enemy. No question about that.
We've been meddling foreign governments for
many, many years.
Many years. Blowback.
And I don't think a lot of Republicans don't even have that much of an issue with that. The problem is that the one thing that they elected, I think the main thing that people elected Trump for was to fix the immigration problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like to be the deporter in chief, to remove all the people that the Democrats brought in to change the electoral map and, fix that problem. And a lot of the issues with Iran, I think, is not so much people have an issue with him attacking Iran, it's that it distracts from the main goal, which is fixing the immigration problem.
Do you think that they were close to getting a nuclear bomb?
I think it doesn't matter.
Okay.
I mean, so there are a number of governments in the world that I don't think should have nuclear weapons. Pakistan is at the top of the list.
Yep.
Right? But they do.
They do.
North Korea, they do.
Yeah.
North Korea threatens to destroy the United States regularly.
They put out videos about it.
Yeah.
About them bombing us.
So here's the question. Why don't we mess with them?
Because
Why
they
don't
have
we
nuclear
bomb
weapons.
them? Because they have nuclear weapons. So what we actually did with this attack on Iran is incentivize them to develop and maintain their own nuclear deterrent. Because it is the only way that we will leave them alone.
And other countries that don't want to be bombed by the United States as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you want nuclear proliferation, what you do is exactly what we've been doing, is attack people who are developing nuclear capabilities. But all that's going to do, unless you're willing to go in and completely destroy their country, which we're not, we've never been able to, let alone willing to, then we can't stop them if they want to. We couldn't stop the Pakistanis. We couldn't stop the Indians. We couldn't stop the Israelis. We couldn't stop the Russians. So we're just going to have to deal with it. And people say, well, the Iranians are a suicide cult. They're going to destroy Israel if they get a nuclear weapon. These guys have been in power for 50 years. If they were a suicide cult, it would be obvious.
Mm-hmm.
You don't stay in power, especially in a place like Iran, for 50 years without being rational pragmatists.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of that is, well, if they are a suicide cult and the only reason they're developing a nuclear weapon is so they can destroy Israel and Israel will destroy them, then why are we even bothering to negotiate with them? How do you negotiate with somebody who's a suicide cultist?
Right.
You can't. It's
wouldn't-
impossible.
They wouldn't come. They wouldn't come to the table.
Right. Why would they?
Right.
So clearly, people say, the death to America, yada, yada. There's lots of people around the world who say death to America because they're pissed at us for one reason or another. That doesn't mean they're suicidal. And I don't even think they're suicidal enough to go after Israel. Although I will say that Israel has a legitimate concern there because they are not a big country.
Right.
And I'd actually say if nuclear weapons are going to be used, the country that's most likely to use them is Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Not because they're evil, not because they're crazy, but because they're a very small country that's extremely vulnerable. And if they get put into a situation where it's an existential threat, then they would use nukes to protect themselves. And I can't blame them for that. But that's the geopolitical situation they're in. Iran is not in that. They don't have any need to do that. Do they dislike the Israelis? Sure. Are they willing to wage proxy wars against them? Absolutely. Are they willing to have a nuclear exchange with them and destroy their own country and kill themselves? I don't think so.
Yeah.
And if there were issues with Muslims having nuclear weapons, well then, again, Pakistan is top of the list, right? That's a country that's not particularly stable, especially in the northern areas. That's where Osama bin Laden was hiding. Like, why is it okay for them to have nukes? Well, nobody will answer that question.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm hoping that was the last we hear of it.
I don't think it is.
I don't
think
think so
the Iranians are going to stop for that very reason, because what we've done is incentivize them to obtain a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
Any way, shape, or form, and they probably will if they really want to.
Yeah.
Their country's big enough, they're rich enough, their economy's not that great, but they can manage it. It's doable. They will.
We need to focus on wins here at home, I think, and.
Well, and if they do, then we're in the same situation as all the other nuclear-armed countries. Then we enter into nuclear deterrence and say, if you do nuke Israel, we will reply. I don't think that's necessarily a good choice on the United States' part, but it's probably what will happen. And because the Israelis can't threaten themselves because officially they don't have any nuclear weapons.
Officially. Have you read that book that came out last year or two about nuclear war?
No. Which book is that?
I think it's called Nuclear War. It basically just talks about if North Korea were to set one off, the chain reaction that would happen, and it talks about the time lapse from the moment it happens till a couple hours later, and then obviously it's like 10,000 years before the Earth becomes re-inhabitable. But it's pretty wild to think about and to hear, and nuclear weapons aren't good. I like that Trump campaign on the idea that, let's see if we can try and eliminate all the nuclear weapons in the world, which probably will never happen.
No, because they're too valuable for precisely the reasons that people use them for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the reason people jumped on the Pakistan-India conflict so quickly was we've got two nuclear-armed states who are fighting a war.
Yeah.
We do not want that to become an existential war.
No.
Never. And one of the reasons why the war in Ukraine has gone on so long is Ukraine didn't have nukes. If they had, would the Russians have ever invaded? Probably not. So, the way the world is going is incentivizing every country that wants to remain a country to get nuclear weapons.
I've seen some of the stuff you post on X from Ukraine, and that's a pretty wild
Yeah, I follow the war very closely.
Do you?
Yeah, it's kind of a hobby of mine. The things that are happening there are, horrific, but from a military science standpoint, are relatively fascinating. These guys on both sides, I think the courage of the soldiers who are fighting that war is, how to say this, like people who fought in the GWAT will actually say this. The guys who were in the GWAT and then went to Ukraine, they're like, it is night and day. It is an unbelievably different experience. The guys who are fighting, both the Ukrainians and the Russians, what they're going through is something that nobody has ever had to go through. It's like World War I, except, multiplied by huge amounts, because World War One, they could stay in the trenches, and for the most part, it was kind of random whether or not you got killed. Sometimes an artillery shell would fall in the trench, but in general, as long as you didn't attack, you were not safe, but you had some protection. These guys,
with the introduction of drones,
the drones are always there.
That's crazy.
Like, I was reading this story about the Russians have gone to 3-man sniper teams.
What are they normally?
They're normally 2. You have a sniper and a spotter. And the reason they've gone to a 3-man team is because the third guy is an air guard. That's how crazy it is. Like, and they've gone to most snipers are still taught you get into a good spot, you can spend time there. They said no. You get into a spot, you take the shot, you get out, because they can't stay anywhere for more than an hour or two because the drones will find them.
That's crazy.
And it's just it's mind-boggling. And what's happened is one of the reasons why it's moving so slowly. The Russians are making progress, but it's slow. And the reason it's slow is because there's essentially a 30-kilometer band around the front line where vehicles are at extreme risk. And so nobody can get in any supplies in any kind of significant amount, because every bus, van, Jeep, ATV, motorcycle, tank, whatever, if it's in that zone, it's going to get spotted and it's going to get attacked if it stays any length of time.
How big are these drones? They're not that big.
They vary. So Baba Yaga, for example, the Ukrainians about, bumped that. Sorry, still there. Okay. It's about, it's arm width. It's pretty big. Yeah. It's a substantial drone. They use those drones for supplies, as motherships for other drones, all kinds of things. The little FPVs, they're, 2 fists together with, the propellers sticking out. They're very small. They're very fast.
Are those ones with, have explosives on them?
Yeah, usually like grenade-size explosives. Those are the ones you always see harassing individual soldiers and striking.
Away. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great a Chosen Company video out there where these guys were assaulting a trench, and you can see the FPVs slamming into the ground because they're using electronic warfare, and what's happening is the Russian FPV controllers are losing control right at the last second, and so they're missing, but it's close. And this stuff, there's like FPV drones, just like every few seconds there's stuff impacting. And that's, in addition to artillery and the drones, but drones, not just FPVs, but drones have had a huge impact in all kinds of things. Close air support doesn't exist anymore. It's all taken over by drones. Artillery spotting, all drones. Nobody even bothers to spot on the ground anymore because the drone sees far more and has a much better position and is probably controlled by the same people running the guns. So you can either have your drone operator sitting next to the gun saying, yep, adjust fire 100 meters up, or you can have a radio and you're calling back and forth with the guy on the front line. They just skip all that now. Like and the Russians have gotten even better at this. They've gotten to the point where Iskander strikes, which used to take like an hour or two for them to, go through the process of actually getting the strike. They can do it in minutes now. Somebody sees a target, their whole, the time it takes from target spotted to missile on target is just a few minutes. It's crazy. And it's all because of these the drones. And I think, and the larger picture, the military will eventually come out with countermeasures. Like, there's lots of electronic warfare. People think that drones are super effective, and what they don't see is the 8 or 9 of the 10 drones that got sent all failed to EW or got shot down. Right? So there's huge drone attrition because they have significant vulnerabilities. But so the militaries will eventually deal with them, and things will change, but they will adapt.
So they're making the drones that they're tethered, right?
The fiber optic drones.
Fiber optic drones, and they got like this wicked long. That's almost like how they used to run communications back in World War.
So that whole idea is really old.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the TOW missile system?
No.
So this is an anti-tank guided missile that the U.S. came out with, I think in the 70s is when it was first deployed. It's wire guided. It does exactly the same thing. It's a missile that you fire. It trails a fiber optic cable behind it, and the operator controls it and aims it onto target, and so that's basically what they're doing. Is they got these huge reels of fiber optic and they just zoom out there.
And that's so that they can't be hacked.
It's so that they're not subject to EW. Yeah. Of which hacking is a part. But there was a great video that came out a couple of days ago.
EW?
Electronic warfare.
Electronic warfare, that's what I thought.
So there's a great video that came out a couple of days ago where one of the fiber optic drones zipped past down this road, and then you see these two Russians come out. Russian pulls out his scissors and goes and cuts the line, and then you see it fall and die and explode. So yeah, they're still vulnerable to other issues, but they're very effective. And it has the effect of stagnating everything. I actually think, based on all of the information that I've gathered, what's probably happening right now is that the Ukrainians have a significant manpower problem, and they are holding the front line. There are significant portions of the front line that are only held with drones.
Wow.
That's both how effective they are and how desperate the situation is becoming. So, and what's happening, and the reason the Russians are able to make ground is they just push forward. They'll get 20 guys on motorcycles. Drones will take a couple out. They'll seize some positions. They get under cover. It's very difficult to dislodge them. Ukrainians don't have reserves they can use to make counterattacks for the most part, and so they fall back. And that just keeps happening because they don't have the troops anymore to defend directly.
Do you think the war will end anytime soon?
Yes.
How soon?
Within a year.
And do you think it's because we're not funding it as much as we were?
No, I think the Ukrainian manpower is going to collapse. They're going to get to the point where they can't even maintain coverage on the front with drones. And eventually what's going to happen is the Russians are going to find a hole. And when they find that hole, they're going to get through, and they're going to take their reserves, and they're going to push it through, and the drones won't be able to stop them.
How many people have died so far?
Oh, who knows? Yeah. The crazy thing about it is people report numbers. They're like, oh, there's this many. Ukraine is the most surveilled war that we have ever had. We have the most on record of all of of missile impacts and drone impacts and all of this stuff, and we still have terrible resolution on what the actual casualty counts are, what the actual number of things that have been destroyed are, because both sides have incentive to lie, and so they're lying like crazy. You'll get all kinds of information warfare stuff, like they'll present the same kill from two different angles, so it looks like it's two different tanks. Hard to tell, right? Like low quality video, all this stuff. So I think it's definitely in the hundreds of thousands of dead,
millions of wounded,
potentially.
Do you think that this whole thing is just data input for future wars?
Always.
Like, at this point, like, this is giving them a lot of valuable information, and
it is. And what it's actually done is it's made the Russians and the Ukrainians are probably the two premier militaries in the world right now.
Yeah.
Because they are the only ones who have this, who are built for this kind of conflict. They both adapted. And, I think any other military going up against them right now would have a big problem. Mm-hmm. And they would either adapt very quickly or they would get defeated. Because if you can imagine, like, the things right now are stagnated in Ukraine, but that's not always going to be the case. And if the Russian army of 2022 had been the Russian army of 2025, the Ukrainians would not have stood a chance. So it's the U.S. military is focused on this. They're definitely working on drone stuff, but I think there's a real misunderstanding of the level of integration and just the sheer volume of the stuff that's going on. Like, many, many, many years ago, I won't reveal how old I am. When we did this sort of thing, there was a lot of, when you went out in the field and you ran a mission, it was you felt like you were kind of blind, right? Like, you had some information about what was going on. You could send out reconnaissance teams. There were things you could do to figure out what was going on, but it was largely very difficult. These guys, the squad leaders, have a drone hovering over their shoulder, and they've got the drone operator telling them, yep, okay, trench on the right, 200 meters, there's two guys. That's the level of intelligence these guys are working with. Mm-hmm. And there's video of it. You can see them literally talking about, okay, trench, two guys, trench 50 meters up, there's two bodies, don't see any movement, okay, you're clear to go. Like these guys are operating with eyes in the sky, and that is going to be much, much harder to deal with than the actual attack drones, because you can have a tethered FPV drone that's just hovering over your head, and there's not much anybody can do about that unless they're willing to attack you. So the other thing is that aside from the military, like the military will eventually develop counters to this, and it'll become a part of the military landscape. The problem comes when it comes to civilians. So we used to have aircraft hijackings. Why would I hijack a plane when I can fly an FPV drone into an engine? How are you going to catch somebody who does that?
Right.
And how are you going to stop that? Because drones are becoming ubiquitous in civil society, and people are using them for deliveries. They're using them to do surveying. They're using them to evaluate roofs. They're using so we can't jam them. We can't shoot them out of the sky. Can't knock them out of the sky. So what do you do when you've got people who are using them for terrorist activity? We've seen a little bit of this in Gaza already, but I think it's going to become much worse, because anybody who figures out, oh, I can do this from, a mile or two away. Nobody's going to have any idea where this drone came from.
There's no signature that they can read.
Sure. So
you're the IT guy. I'm asking you.
So, well, I'll tell you this: because
they're supposed to be registered, right? I'm sure if you're a terrorist, you're not going to register a drone.
Exactly. The problem is, so DJI, the big Chinese manufacturer, in their communications protocols with their drones, they actually do put in location information. So if you know what you're doing, you can listen in on what the DJI drones are talking about and find out where the operator is. But of course, the first thing the Ukrainians and the Russians did when they got those drones is flash them with different firmware that doesn't do that, right? And you can do that in the United States as well. So you're not going to. You might be able to, if somebody's using a radio controlled drone, you might be able to triangulate their controller, if you're quick enough. So here's the thing: the drones are fast. If the operator knows what he's doing and he has a target, it's probably going to be, let's say the target is a mile away. It's probably going to be less than 5 minutes. So can you find the operator of a specific drone in less than 5 minutes? Because as soon as the drone goes in and explodes, he's gone.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it should be terrifying, and people should be very concerned about it. And there's some evidence that people are, because I don't know if you followed the whole thing with the Pope switching over, but they had a picture of a guy with a anti-drone rifle at the papal ascension ceremony.
What is that, a shotgun?
No, it was one of the electronic warfare ones. It usually uses various frequencies to drown out or cause the drone to lose control.
So an anti-drone rifle.
Yeah.
So does it fire a projectile?
No, that particular one doesn't. No.
It's just like a EMP type.
Yeah.
So they have EMP rifles.
Essentially.
Wow.
For drones. Like they're not. If you point them at your car, it probably isn't going to do anything. But it's just designed to disrupt the drone communications.
That's nuts.
But of course, but things in Ukraine have already developed past that, right? With people using fiber optic drones.
Yeah.
So you could trace the fiber optic back to the operator eventually.
So how high up in the air are they with these fiber optic cables attached to them?
So the fiber optic cables run along the ground. The most of the drones that use them run very low.
Yeah.
Because the higher you go, the more weight fiber optic is pulling it down, and the more it takes to keep it going. So the lower is typically better. And also they're dealing with things like nets on roads and various anti-drone defenses, so they're usually skimming on the ground. In fact, you can even see videos of both Russians and Ukrainians. They've adopted this technique. Well, they'll just land the drone beside the road and wait.
Yep.
And so they're watching the road, and as soon as they see a target, they'll take off and go after it. But they don't even, they're not even flying around anymore. They'll just wait.
I remember when the war on terror first started, and we went to Afghanistan and Iraq, and they first started talking about drones. But drones back then were basically small planes.
Yeah, and those still exist. They're still around.
Yeah,
but yeah, think of, I mean, for people who were in the Great War on Terror, it's going to be the global war on terror. It's IEDs, but they fly. That's nuts. And they have thermal, right?
It's terrifying.
Like, it's terrifying. And nobody's really adapted that because nothing really bad has happened yet. So it's coming. Like Kirkuk in Iraq was attacked by a combination of rockets and drones, I think yesterday or the day before. So, yeah, it's going to start happening, and we're going to have to deal with it.
That's scary. And now I did read that shotguns were now like the weapon of choice. But is that just like some comforting false narrative?
Not entirely. There's videos of both Russians and Ukrainians knocking drones down with shotguns.
Buckshot?
Yeah, buckshot. I've seen some evidence that people like number 4 buckshot because it's got more rounds. And the thing about these, especially the FPV drones, the larger drones not so much, but the FPV drones, pretty much any hit anywhere on the drone is going to knock it out of the sky.
Because they're light, right?
Yeah, they're very small. They're very light. All you have to do is damage them in some way. So you hit the battery, you hit the controller, you hit the camera, you hit any of the rotors. You even damage the body and cause it to unbalance. It'll make it difficult to control. So they're as a single entity, they're extremely vulnerable to all kinds of things. And especially when they're carrying an explosive.
They emit heat though, right?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can spot them against the sky with a thermal. They stand out like a neon sign. Both the motors and the battery are very warm. Although people are working on that.
Oh man.
But yeah, so they're very easy to destroy individually. So shotguns do work. There's plenty of video out there of them working.
But they're fast too.
They're fast.
So you got to be good.
But only the very smallest ones are the ones that are very fast. The slightly larger ones, the Mavic level ones, the next level up, they're not that quick. And those are the ones that carry the RPG warheads, because the smaller ones don't have enough payload capacity to carry anything more than essentially a grenade.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger ones can carry an RPG, but the bigger ones are not as nimble and they're not as fast. So what you'll see, a lot of these videos are basically people in the back of a truck. And, the drone will approach them for the rear, so it's even slower, and they're able to get a few shots off, and they're able to knock them off.
I saw a video like the Chinese drone systems that they have where they just send off like a
swarms.
bunch. Yeah, swarms of drones. We don't want to play with that.
Well, it's kind of like nuclear weapons. It's out there and we can't stop it.
Yeah.
So we need to learn how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. On the flip side, the Taiwanese having a lot of drones makes invading Taiwan even more difficult for the Chinese.
Do they have a lot?
So they do.
That's good. So what's your foreign policy as a libertarian?
Avoid entanglements. Trade with everybody. Don't ally with anybody.
Yeah, pretty simple.
I'm the George Washington level of that. Like there's all of our involvement in the Middle East. I'm old, so I was around in the 80s, and we were doing all of that stuff in the 80s. And every single time we do something, they're like, "Oh, this is great. We have to do this. This is the biggest threat ever. WMDs in Iraq, yada yada yada." And it always turns out to mostly be a lie. And it always makes things worse. And so, like, Saddam Hussein is a great example. Saddam Hussein was our ally.
Mm-hmm.
We supported him in the war against Iran.
Mm-hmm.
We gave him tons of money.
And chemical weapons.
Yeah. Dave Smith says, if you want to know who our next enemy is, just look at who we're funding now.
Yeah.
Like, because we don't seem to have any consistent policy other than we adapt minute to minute to whatever situation we think we want. And it's a complete waste of lives and money.
So why do people that don't run the policy themselves, like why do like the people that were cheering on that we bomb Iran, why do you think they keep insisting that we keep following these policies when they haven't really given us much of a result?
So 2 reasons. The result that it gives us is that it feeds the military-industrial complex. So when I say it doesn't give results, I'm talking about, normal American humans.
And that's who I'm talking about.
People who benefit from this obviously support it. So there's definitely a large amount of that. We have to stay at war if we want to keep funding the military-industrial complex. If we have a sustained period of peace, eventually they will lose money, and they don't want that to happen. So the second part of it is, Middle East in particular, there are a fairly large number of people who support Israel and want Israel to remain as a country, which is understandable. So that part I don't object to nearly as much. although I don't think Israel has been a good ally to the United States. They've instigated a lot of things that were really bad for us. But at the same time, they're probably the only country in the Middle East that has, that is in any way reasonably close to our position on anything. So, yeah, I'd rather we didn't. I'd rather we stop funding them. I think they can manage on their own. They're a modern first world country. There's no reason why they can't pay for their own defense. It's kind of the same problem we've had with Europe for so many years.
Right.
Was that we were subsidizing their defense and allowing them to get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a ton of money that American taxpayers spend for essentially no gain for us. You can argue that it's a gain that Europe's been peaceful for the last 50 years. Maybe not so peaceful now.
Not so peaceful now.
But
seems
sure.
Yeah, and I mean the Middle East has been
the Middle East since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of recorded history.
But when Europeans go to war, it's pretty brutal.
Has been, yeah.
Yeah, and it's usually where most people die. Well, this has been quite the talk.
Yeah, thanks. It's been fun.
So you gonna run again?
Oh, that's the question.
You got one. I guess it's a little early.
No, I mean, so the question is, I don't know. It's been a lot of time and a lot of work, and it really feels like you're kind of rolling the boulder uphill.
Yeah,
Sisyphean. But on the other hand, I understand that we need to do that if we want to keep making progress in New Hampshire towards, having more liberty and having a stronger culture and a stronger economy. So I don't know. We'll see. Next year.
Well,
we have to decide because I'm pretty sure that did the changes to the electoral calendar happen? So we're going to need to know by March of next year.
Oh, that's right, because they want to make it. What is the changes in it?
We are moving the primary from September to June.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, and I want to say I'm pretty sure that happened, but I'm not 100% because I lost track of it and all of the craziness that was happening the last couple of weeks. So I need to double check. But
so you get a couple less months to think about it.
Yeah.
Well,
Which is okay.
Seem very knowledgeable on a lot of different areas, and I've enjoyed talking with you about all the things we have talked about. And,
likewise.
We need good people in office, and I think that.
I will say this. I think I've been a pretty decent representative. I've made mistakes because I'm new, for sure, but I think I've done a pretty good job of representing my constituents. My main issue is that I'm a terrible politician. So I didn't manage to raise any money last time. I got a little bit of money from NHLA, and that was pretty much it. So, yeah.
So how much did you spend on your campaign?
A little bit shy of $2,000, I think. A little bit more, something around there.
Well, that's not too bad.
No.
Because they say the average price of a campaign for a state rep in New Hampshire is $5,000. And they said that some people have spent upwards of like $50,000 just for a seat.
Yeah, if you counted the time, it would be a lot more. Because I basically was out 3 or 4 days a week, doing door knocking in my ward, and then another day or two doing door knocking for everybody else.
How much time do you spend in Concord?
So while we were in session, 2 days a week, 2.5. But what you don't see there is that if you want to know what's actually going on, you need to read the bills that you're looking at. So there's a lot more time spent in just trying to figure out what's going on and reading the bills that you are expected to vote on and talking to other people about that. So,
do you read every single one?
Not the actual text, no. But what I do is I will feed them into an AI and get a summary. And then talk to other folks about them. It's not a perfect vetting system to find out stuff that might be problematic, but it's pretty good. Embarrassingly, I missed the AI regulation bill that came through last week, which was really terrible.
What was it?
It passed, and so it's going to become law. It criminalizes a generative AI talking to a minor about suicide and encouraging them to suicide or do other illegal things, which, okay, great. So the remedy is they talk to the owner or operator of the generative AI and they say, you need to fix this. And if you don't, you're going to pay this fine and you have 90 days or whatever to do it. The problem is, of course, is that if you know anything about generative AI, there's no button to press. They can't do that. The owner or operator of the AI can't say, "Well, we fixed this problem. It won't talk to minors about suicide anymore," because that's not how these things are built. You build the model and the rules, and you try to get them to set things up, and then you feed them a bunch of training data. And then what comes out of that training data is what they use to then construct conversations with the user.
You can't just take that part about suicide and
No.
self-harm out.
Yeah. So what's actually happened is they've tried, a lot of the big AIs have rules against talking about suicide. And people have made a game out of getting the AI to bypass those rules.
Does it learn?
No.
The AI? So how?
Not in the way that you're thinking, no. You can add new information to the training data, and the AI will then use that. But it's not. They don't learn in the way that we learn. They don't try things multiple times and then, make the intuitive leap to figure out, oh, this is a better way to do things.
So if you never put that information in it to begin with, how does it acquire it? Like, how does it make it? How can you not?
So here's your problem.
Okay.
Let's talk about something simple. Let's say weed.
Okay.
You don't want your AI to talk about weed.
Yeah.
How do you not give it any training data that doesn't talk about weed?
Well, you either don't inject it into it or...
Well, how? So what criteria do you use in this huge, vast corpus of training data, millions and millions and millions of pages? I need to have it not talk about anything related to marijuana, weed, Mary Jane, all of the euphemisms for weed, right? I need to not talk about smoking, because if you talk about smoking, then eventually you're going to talk about smoking Adobe or Doobie or whatever the current terminology is, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to ban all of those words? Are you sure you got them all? And then, so what about edibles? Oh, special. Are you going to ban the term special brownie? Right? So it quickly becomes this problem where you're like, how do I tell humans, treating the AI like a human, how do I tell a human not to talk about something? It's like telling an 11-year-old that farts aren't funny. You can tell them all you want. It doesn't work. They're still going to think that farts are funny. And you could try to ban them from farting or even talking about it. It's not going to work.
But the AI is still going to figure that stuff out?
Because you're going to feed it information. And understand, it's not the AI figuring stuff out. It is the AI responding to the prompts that the user is giving it.
The user, but not the creator?
Right. The creator has nothing to do with how the AI responds other than setting the basic rules for training.
Okay.
So that's why it's called generative AI. It generates responses.
Okay.
It generates this corpus of data that it uses to interact with the user. So if the user wants the AI to talk about something, the AI is going to try to talk about it.
Okay.
So if you've made if you've included anything in your corpus of training data that has anything to do with this, like, for example, let's talk about suicide in a more serious note. You can kill yourself with common household chemicals that are under your sink.
Right.
So are you telling me that you're going to eliminate any discussion of household chemicals
And
from your AI?
Right. Knives, sharp objects.
Knives, sharp objects. You gonna have your AI not talk about guns?
Right.
Now we're into some serious First Amendment territory, right? And even if you try to do that, if there's anything at all, then the users will jailbreak it and they'll get around whatever restrictions you put in and they'll get it to talk about it anyway.
Now, is this a Republican bill that went through?
Yeah, unfortunately.
And do the people that wrote this bill know anything about AI?
I think they know some things. I think it is a for the kids reaction. Like they don't want minors interacting with generative AI, which is perfectly understandable. Yeah. We don't want AI trying to convince kids to kill themselves. This is bad. The problem is not the intent of the bill. The problem is the function of the bill is not workable. You can't. It doesn't, like, what's going to happen is they're going to go to these companies. They're going to say, fix it so that this kid can't talk about suicide. And the company will come back to them and say, okay, we fixed it. And then 2 days later, some other kid's going to get it to talk about it. And they're going to be like, you didn't fix it. Like, well, we thought we fixed it. And you're going to get into this endless cycle of them trying to fix it and not being able to because what you want is technically impossible.
Did you bring this up at all in Concord?
I did.
And how'd that go?
Not well. I convinced some people. We had a number of people vote against it when it first came up, but not enough.
Is this on the floor or is this in committee?
It was in the floor. I didn't even realize it was in committee or it was even in the pipeline until it showed up. It was a Senate bill, and so we didn't even see it until it crossed over. I didn't get a chance to look at it. I mean, it could have, right? But there's 1,000 bills, and humans have bandwidth limitations.
Sounds like this is something you've been talking about with them from the start. You seem to be the guy to talk to.
No, I mean I'm by no means an expert on AI, but again I have a long history of IT and understanding how IT interacts and how these things are built, and so it's more just understanding. No, you can't do that. That's not going to work. So it's not great, but I think it's probably just going to end up being a dud because I don't think it's going to be enforceable, and it can only be enforced by the Attorney General. They did fix the private right of action, so people can't sue. It has to be the Attorney General who's going after someone for something. So I think what's probably going to happen is nothing. But it's still not great to have laws on the books that are unenforceable and non-functional. So this is what it is.
Yeah. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for coming by and
thanks for having me.
Sitting down. This is the longest one I've done yet.
Oh, how much?
2 hours and 40 minutes.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
No, that's awesome.
Good conversation is great.
Yeah. But I've enjoyed this a lot. You've definitely opened my eyes to a lot of different things, and the whole Ukraine situation alone is.
Aside from the horror of it, it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, so, the amount of input that they're probably getting for warfare right now, and like you said, it's probably stuff that we haven't seen since World War I. Like trench warfare was pretty, like a novel thing back then, with the way that it was happening, and I mean, everything that's happening with all the drones right now is just terrifying. And I think that we should all just try and pursue peace all around the world.
It would be nice. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen.
I hope you come back again.
Okay.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
Do you have anything you want to tell anybody? Any links or any social media?
I'm at mdrew for NH on X. But you can always ask me questions or interact there. I'm usually on every day at some point. So yeah, hit me up.
Awesome. All right. Thanks everybody.